Welcome to the untamed depths of the jungle, where towering trees block out the sun, rivers wind like serpents through the undergrowth, and life hums in every shadowed corner. This is a world that has always held secrets of survival, of healing, and of mysteries far beyond the reach of ordinary people. But there were those who could listen to the forest, those who claimed to hear its whispers. They were the shamans. For thousands of years, shamans walked barefoot through these green cathedrals, guided by instinct, vision, and ritual. They were the ones who somehow knew which bark could stop a fever, which vine could cleanse the blood, or which root could ease the torment of pain. To the outside world, their knowledge seems impossible. After all, in jungles with tens of thousands of plant species, how could anyone know where to begin? Yet shamanic traditions mapped these medicines long before modern science ever caught up. Tonight, we'll drift into that world together. We'll explore how shamans discovered hidden jungle medicines, not through chance alone, but through centuries of ritual, careful observation, and what many believed was communication with spirits of the forest. Their role was not simply as healers, but as keepers of balance between the human world and the natural one. So as you listen, let the noise of the day slip away. Imagine the damp earth beneath your feet, the chorus of insects filling the air, the faint glow of firelight at the center of a clearing. We're stepping back into a time when every leaf could hold a cure, every root a mystery, and every whisper of the jungle a guide. This is the story of shamans, their medicines, and the hidden knowledge of the wild. The rainforest breathes in slow, measured pulses. Dawn's first light slips between the leaves like a shy spirit, painting emerald shafts of hope across a floor scuffed by centuries of fallen branches and decaying fronds. Mist curls low, clinging to roots and rocks as though the earth itself exhales vapor, reluctant to reveal everything at once. Every droplet, suspended in the cool air, seems to hold a secret. It's here, in this primordial cathedral of green, that shamans learn to listen, not just with ears, but with marrow and bone, to the hidden languages of plants and the restless chatter of unseen creatures. With each step deeper beneath the canopy, the ordinary markers of civilization vanish. The sun, once a brilliant orb, fragments into scattered motes of light, filtered through an unending lattice of limbs and leaves. The forest amplifies even the softest sounds. A distant bird call resonates like a gong. The drip of condensation off a banana leaf echoes as if within a cavern. Air tastes thick and sweet, carrying hints of decay and bloom-rotting wood and fresh blossoms mingling in equal measure. In this place, every breath is an act of discovery. Here and there, enormous buttress roots arch from the ground, vast natural cathedrals carved by the slow work of necessity. Vines thicker than a man's arm coil upward, weaving walls where no walls should stand. Epiphytes cling high on branches, living off moisture in the air, their tangled roots dangling like the tassels of some enormous skyward curtain. Clouds of insects hover at the edges of vision, darting in and out of gaps, impossible to count, impossible to catalog. A hum with ancient insistence, the first of many voices that murmur the forest's refrain. For the ancient healers, this was both playground and proving ground. Without maps, without paths, shamans navigated by instinct and memory. They observed the flight of lizards across mossy trunks, noted the flutter of butterflies around particular flowers, and listened for the faintest calls of frogs hidden in leaf litter. Over time, those subtleties wove into patterns, and patterns into knowledge. The forest did not yield its secrets freely. It demanded respect, patience, and a kind of surrender. At the edge of a river, where sunlight glints on rippling water, shamans first learned the concept of balance. They saw how fallen logs sheltered tadpoles, how submerged leaves fed fish, and how currents shaped the stones beneath. The water taught them that life is a constant flow of give and take, a lesson they carried back to dry land. They watched birds skimming the surface, dipping bills into the stream, and realized that healing too required both openness and precision. They named the plants by touch and taste before they dared to ingest. A leaf that crumbled between the fingers like dry parchment told one story. Another with oil-slick veins hinted at something richer, more potent. A bitter sap meant caution. A milky latex signaled potential danger. And so, in trial and error, with tiny nibbles and careful observations, they edged closer to the medicines hidden in plain sight. Drinking decoctions for the first time was an act of faith. Water bubbled over hot stones and hollowed logs as shamans performed chants to unseen spirits. Their voices rose and fell in a rhythm older than recorded memory, each syllable a plea for guidance. They inhaled herbal smoke in slender pipes, letting fragrant plumes twist around them like protective talismans. In these early experiments, the forest responded. Heat flared in the veins, visions glimmered at the periphery of sight, and sometimes the ground itself seemed to ripple underfoot. Dreams became lessons. In the hush between sleep and waking, shamans saw rivers of light flowing from particular groves, or heard the whispered names of plants they had barely noticed. At dawn, they would return to those spots, seeking leaves or roots bathed in mystery. The plants, they believed, chose to reveal themselves, offering cures only to those who recognized their songs. Rituals marked every discovery. A bark that staunched bleeding warranted a ceremony of thanks, complete with painted faces and feathered headdresses. The forest seemed to lean in, hushed and expectant, as the shaman laid handfuls of ground powder on fresh wounds, watched the bruised flesh knit together. In that moment, the forest itself appeared to pulse with approval, as though acknowledging an ancient debt settled. Over generations, these acts of listening and responding became codified. Apprentice healers learned to distinguish dozens of plant families by tiny variations. Leaf-edge serrations, the scent released when a stem was snapped, the pattern of veins like tiny tributaries. They cataloged them in oral scrolls, weaving names and effects into stories of spirits and ancestors. Each tale served a dual purpose: to preserve knowledge and to cloak it in the power of myth, keeping it alive through the ages. Trees that towered like green skyscrapers were identified for their bark, which peeled in papery layers to reveal medicinal compounds. Shrubs hunting the understory bore fruits whose juices soothed fevered brows. Mosses carpeting the forest floor whispered of antiseptic properties. Even fungi strange, dripping shapes emerging from rotting wood-filled gaps in the shaman's pharmacopoeia, some easing pain, others unlocking slurred speech. But it wasn't enough to know which plant healed which ailment. Shamans sought to understand why. They watched how animals treated their wounds, how a monkey might chew on a particular leaf after a fall, or how a bird dipped its feathers in mud, then shook them clean. They paid attention to rainstorms, noting how heavy showers coaxed certain flowers to burst into bloom, releasing potent oils. They saw how the forest changed with the moon's phases, how sap ran thicker during full moons, and how roots dug deeper during new moons. In time, the forest unfolded its secrets in layers. The first layer was obvious plants for cuts and fevers. The second revealed tonics for strengthening the weak, sedatives for anxious souls. The third, most elusive layer was reserved for the spirit medicines, plants that, when consumed, blurred the boundary between flesh and spirit, offering visions that guided decisions, healed psychic wounds, and opened doorways to ancestral realms. Initiation rituals became tests of endurance. Young shamans fasted on bitter teas beneath a canopy that swayed with the weight of unseen eyes. They emerged from those trials pale and trembling, eyes bright with newfound understanding. If they spoke clearly of what they had seen, rivers of color, ancestral figures cloaked in leaves, they were deemed ready to join the council of healers. If not, they returned to the edge of villages, nursing sprained ankles and bruised egos until another chance arose. Communities clustered along the forest's borders, villages woven between groves. Shamans lived on the fringe, neither fully part of the domestic sphere nor entirely of the wild. They moved between worlds, translating the forest's lexicon into remedies, drawing on both communal memory and personal revelation. Their knowledge was revered and feared because it tapped into something ancient and unknowable. Journeying deeper, shamans carried only what they could sling over their shoulders: a gourd of water, a pouch of dried herbs, a small knife to split bark and roots. At night, they slept beneath the boughs, lulled to sleep by the rustle of leaves and distant calls that spoke of predators and potential prey alike. They learned to interpret these nocturnal whispers, the trill of frogs signaling rain, the silhouetted shape of a prowling cat forewarning danger. By day, they followed patterns. Vines climbing toward light indicated moisture deep below. Bright red berries popped open at the first sign of humidity. Insects revealed hidden edibles. The bees congregating on a leaf suggested nectar-rich flowers. Ants crawling along a stem hinted at sweet sap within. The forest, in turn, rewarded those who listened. A small bush yielded leaves that eased coughs. A creeping plant offered resin to seal wounds. Each success deepened the shaman's bond with the green world. Yet not every experiment ended in triumph. Some teas induced fierce vomiting, purging more than sickness, sometimes the will itself. Others caused hallucinations so vivid that shamans wandered, lost, for days along riverbanks, guided back only by the distant chants of companions. Some attempts resulted in rashes, fevers, or worse. Each failure was recorded with as much care as every victory, wrapped in stories of caution and respect. Through century after century, a tapestry of knowledge took shape. It spanned hundreds of plant species, from towering trees to minute sedges, and included observations of seasonal cycles, soil types, and climatic shifts. The shamanic pharmacopoeia grew, not as a ledger of cold facts, but as an ever-evolving dialogue with the living world. It was knowledge rooted in humility, a recognition that the forest could give, but it could also take away. The most revered shamans became living repositories of this lore. They could name dozens of cures from memory, recite the proper preparation methods, and recall the spirits associated with each remedy. To sit with one was to step into a living library, where every word held a weight of centuries. Their voices were measured, their words deliberate, as if invoking the very roots that sustained them. As explorers and traders ventured into these green depths, they marveled at tales of miraculous cures. Arrow wounds sealed overnight, fevers broken with 2 sips of bitter decoction, invisible maladies revealed and dispelled. European scientists would later come to study samples, isolating active compounds that led to modern medicines. But those breakthroughs all began here, in the hush of dawn beneath the dripping canopies, where shamans first learned to see not just leaves and bark, but the pulsing life beneath. Into the heart of the jungle is where the story begins. It is where mystery and medicine entwine, where trial and error become rituals of discovery, and where the boundary between healer and forest blurs. In this realm of infinite green, ancient shamans heard the silent pleas of the sick, felt the heartbeat of foliage, and followed threads of intuition into the unknown. They mapped the invisible pathways of power that run through every root and stem, gathering cures hidden in plain sight. As the sun climbs higher and the mist dissipates, the forest sheds nothing of its enigma. Each leaf, each scent-laden breeze, still holds a whisper of knowledge waiting to be heard. In the next section, we will follow the first true expeditions, journeys by firelight and sweat, where challengers braved fevered mosquitoes and jaguar hunts in search of a single plant that could banish agony. But for now, we stand at the threshold, senses alert, hearts open, ready to tread paths where footsteps have echoed for millennia, down into the heart of the jungle. A single torch flickers against the woven palm walls as dawn's first orange light seeps through the cracks, painting the shaman's hut in soft hues of gold and rust. He sits cross-legged on a bed of dried palm fronds, fingers wrapped around a carved gourd rattle, eyes half closed as if still drifting in the dream world. His skin, painted in ochre stripes, catches the firelight, the patterns tracing ancestral symbols that whisper of jaguar kin and serpent elders. In this moment of hush, in the pause between night's final sigh and day's awakening, his presence holds the fragile boundary between the seen and the unseen. Villagers will soon stream in with ailments of body and spirit, but for now, the air is still charged with expectancy. Outside, the forest breathes around the hut, a living cloak of green so dense that each breath feels like an offering. The shaman has built his sanctuary at the edge of sky and leaf, where sunlight can reach but never fully dispel the hush. Shells carved from fallen branches hold dried bundles of leaves and seeds, bright red annatto for vision, powdery blue petals of the moonflower for sleep, twisted roots of the cat's claw vine for invigoration. Each specimen is labeled in his memory, not by Latin names, but by the voices the plants speak when crushed. One hiss of bitter oil, another sigh of sweet sap. From earliest childhood, those destined to walk this path were marked by uncanny signs. Perhaps a fever would warp their visions, coaxing them into realms where rivers glowed and spirits whispered. Or maybe they spoke in animal voices, chirping like toucans or growling like ocelots, so convincingly that elders took notice. These were not mere quirks, they were the forest's invitation. Amidst ordinary childhood pranks, the future shaman sensed patterns the untrained eye missed. How butterflies congregated around certain flowers, how frogs sang only after particular rains, how sap from one tree glowed faintly in moonlight. Such insights hinted at an unseen order. When the elders convened, they tested the initiate. By day, they might bind eyes with woven vines, and send the child into the grove to retrieve a single leaf by scent alone. By night, they would offer age-old teas that blurred waiting and dreaming. Those who returned unharmed, eyes bright with newfound clarity, earned the right to learn. Thus began the long apprenticeship, years of trial and error, of waking visions and fevered trances. Under stern tutelage, apprentices split bark and tasted tinctures, recording every reaction in memory and myth. Failure brought bruised bodies and humbling lessons. Success wove seeds of confidence, time-honored threads in a tapestry of lore. Healing was only one facet of the shaman's calling. He was also the spiritual guide who led souls through unseen passages. When a child cried out in the night, seized by nightmares of leaf-cloaked spirits, villagers sought him to mend fraying threads between worlds. In a circle of chanting women, he inhaled smoke from a sacred pipe, the aromatic plumes curling around his body like gentle ghosts. With closed eyes, he traced patterns in the air, invoking animal guardians, the anaconda, whose coiling form whispered of transformation, and the eagle, whose soaring gaze revealed hidden truths. Through song and fumigation, he coaxed stray spirits back to rest. Every illness carried two faces, the physical and the spiritual, and only the shaman could discern which needed tending. A fever might be more than microbes. It could be anger unaddressed, a spirit slighted by deforestation, or grief unresolved. He journeyed inward, drumming a heartbeat rhythm, guiding his consciousness beyond flesh. In the spirit realm, he bargained. Return the warmth, but leave the life. In exchange, he offered tobacco smoke as an offering, sugarcane juice as tribute, and a vow to protect the woodlands where the spirit dwelt. Only then did he prescribe the decoction, the boiled bark or chewed leaf, safe in the knowledge it carried both medicine and blessing. Communal ceremonies wove healing into the fabric of village life. At full moon, the shaman led a procession to the river's edge, faces painted white with clay to reflect moonbeams. He scattered bright flower petals in the current offerings to water spirits, and gathered children in a slow dance, guiding them toward unity with the waves. Laughter rose like wind chimes as he chanted, and even the most stoic elders found their shoulders loosening. In these gatherings, the shaman reminded everyone that health was communal, not individual. That shared song and ritual bound bodies and hearts alike, fortifying the village against unseen perils. His role reached far beyond hearth and home, extending into fields of planting and zones of hunting. Before the first seeds of manioc were sown, he consulted the forest, seeking omens in drifting clouds and insect swarms. A sudden hush among frogs signaled a shift in moisture. A gathering of ants on a leaf predicted heavy rains. Acting on these signs, he advised where to plant, ensuring tubers took root in forgiving soil. Hunters, too, sought his counsel, requesting charms to silence footsteps and sharpen arrows. Armed with feathered amulets and whispered incantations, they entered the thicket with the forest's favor cradled in their pockets. When conflicts flared between neighboring clans, the shaman's voice carried weight beyond superstition. Feuds that might have boiled into bloodshed were diffused at his urging, as he invoked ancestral pacts and recounted ancient alliances. He summoned images of shared hunts and collective harvests, reminding all that survival depended on cooperation. In a gesture of peace, he might offer a ceremonial drink brewed from bark that healed wounds and bitterness alike. Those who drank became bound, loosed from hate by the medicine's residual warmth, a promise etched into flesh and spirit. Without written scripts, the shaman was the living archive of the tribe's history. He recited genealogies that stretched back generations, linking each birth to an ancestor's triumph or tragedy. When famine struck or floods rose, he told of past remedies and rituals that had restored balance. In his oral scrolls, plants and myths intertwined. The monkey's tail vine, first chewed by great-grandfather to stop a child's fever. The bark of the kapok, once used to heal wounds after a jaguar attack. Children listened wide-eyed, the tales shaping a reverence for both heritage and habitat. He was judge, mediator, and moral compass, conducting divination to unmask wrongdoers or confirm innocence. Through the hallucinogenic were vine, he entered a trance where bone shards cast upon a mat formed prophetic patterns. Could he read the shards, revealing whether a theft was the work of malice or misfortune? Or might the footprints of a prowling jaguar herald the need for stronger boundary wards? His verdicts carried ritual weight. Those found culpable might fast until the forest absolved them, while the innocent donned headdresses at festivals of gratitude. Life's most delicate moments fell under his care. At birth, he draped a newborn in leaves of the lemon basil shrub to protect against early spirits. He whispered the infant's name into the breeze, sending it to the sky spirits as both greeting and safeguard. When adolescence approached, he oversaw rites of passage, silent retreats in hidden groves, where teens consumed mild hallucinogens that fractured perception and fostered the first inklings of spiritual purpose. Emerging pale and reeling, they shed childhood skins and donned feathered cloaks that marked them members of the adult world. Death, too, demanded his presence. As the dying lay beneath the forest's hush, the shaman stood vigil, chanting lullabies to ease the soul's passage. He burned sacred resins that glowed blue in the gloom, their smoke guiding the departed along starlit corridors. After death, he led funerary rites, the body wrapped in palm mats, grave goods offering sustenance for voyage beyond the canopy. Weeks later, he orchestrated a rebirth feast, scattering seeds at the grave's edge, symbolizing life's enduring cycle. In every step, he wove comfort into grief, ensuring the living and dead remained bound by love and respect. Myths lent weight to his every utterance. The origin of the shaman's power was tied to the story of the white-feathered jaguar, whose pelt contained the cure for all ills. Legend said that when the first healer emerged from that jaguar's paw print, he carried its guidance into the world of humans. In another tale, The moon itself descended into the jungle, ripening fruits with silver light and teaching shamans how to harness lunar energy in salves for insomnia and despair. These stories did more than entertain. They anchored the shaman's work in cosmic order, reminding villagers that their fates were woven into a greater web. Guardians of the forest's pharmacy, shamans upheld strict codes of sustainability. They harvested only mature roots, severing small sections of bark so trees could heal. They avoided over-harvesting sacred groves, allowing entire patches to regenerate while gathering from adjacent areas. Offerings of tobacco and water honored each plant taken, and prayers carried in smoke returned gratitude to the earth. In following these practices, shamans ensured that tomorrow's healers would find as many cures as their ancestors did today. The journey of the shaman was one of perpetual danger. Every trance opened a doorway that might admit malevolent spirits. Shamans spoke of soul wounds, inflicted when the boundary between worlds thinned too far, headaches so fierce they felled a man, fevers that burned from within like coals, or visions of shadow beasts leaping at their chests. When possessed or diseased, they became patients themselves, treated by peers who wielded counter-rituals. The reverse song to eject unwanted entities, or the smoke of a contrasting herb that neutralized the poison. With the arrival of outsiders, missionaries, traders, colonial officials, the shaman's world shifted. Many rituals were outlawed as devilish. Sacred sites were destroyed in the name of progress. Yet shamans showed extraordinary resilience. Some moved their ceremonies to hidden clearings deep beneath the canopy, conducting rites only by torchlight. Others wove Christian symbols into their practices, blessing gourd rattles with water from Mass and invoking Jesus alongside animal guides. Through adaptation, they preserved the essence of their calling. Today, echoes of their work ripple outward. Ethnobotanists study alkaloids first pointed out by shamans, while pharmaceutical labs isolate compounds used to treat malaria, cancer, and chronic pain. In remote villages, elder healers still walk ancestral paths, harvest plants by moonlight, and recite chants that stitch together past and present. Their knowledge, part science, part song, reminds us that healing springs from deep relationships, not just laboratories. They teach that health is woven into forests and spirits as much as into cells. In every beat of the rattle, every flicker of painted face, the shaman reaffirms humanity's ancient debt to the living earth. He reveals that survival hinges not on conquering nature, but on listening and responding with humility to its manifold voices. When fever strikes or hearts grow heavy, the shaman's song remains our oldest medicine, a litany of leaves and legends of ancestors' whispers, and the promise that even in darkness, the forest offers both cure and counsel. Moonlight drifts through the woven palm fronds of the shaman's hut in silvery bands, illuminating motes of dust that dance like tiny spirits. At the center, a low fire coils its smoke around a kettle carved from clay, where bitter-smelling vines steep into a potion meant to open doors unseen. The shaman sits before it, legs crossed, fingertips brushing the surface of the dark brew, as though sensing pulses beneath its rippling surface. Here, in the hush before ritual, he listens, leaning forward not with his ears, but with his whole being, attuned to whispers he alone can hear. That whisper begins in the breath of the jungle itself. As the hot clay pot exhales steam, the scent of crushed leaves unfurls. Sweet tobacco, earthy cacao husks, the faint, ghostly perfume of yage vine. Each aroma carries a history a dozen generations of hunters and honey-gatherers, mothers and midwives encoded in chemical signals that the shaman's senses translate into stories. He inhales deeply, allowing the vapors to wind through his nostrils and flood his mind, until the boundary between self and green world softens, like mist blurring forest trails at dawn. When the firelight dances against the mud walls, the shaman begins his chant, a low, rolling cadence that builds slowly, like thunder awakening far-off hills. His voice weaves through the room, summoning the spirits tethered to each plant he has collected. The jaguar as breath in cat's claw vine, the hummingbird's quicksilver gleam. In honey-lipped blossoms, the elder tree's slow patience in wrinkled bark. With every syllable, the spirits stir, coalescing into shapes only he can see. A quetzal feather spinning in midair, the ripple of snake scales sliding through undergrowth, the soft pulse of a frog's throat glowing in the dark. As the brew warms his veins, the shaman drifts toward vision. In that liminal space, the forest speaks in a tongue older than language. He hears the rustle of leaves as syllables, the plash of distant water as punctuation, the staccato clicks of beetles as a chorus of consonants. A single vine curls at his feet, transforming into a twisting serpent that beckons him deeper into a dream-lit grove. There, he pauses beneath a towering kapok tree, whose roots radiate like spokes in a wheel. Its bark, he knows, contains resin that can staunch bleeding. Its canopy, he understands, gathers moonlight that soothes aching bones. The plant does not simply exist. It instructs. When the world tilts and neural pathways ignite, the shaman descends further into the spirit realm. He recalls how, the previous full moon, he dreamt of a flower with petals the color of sunrise. In that vision, a hummingbird plucked its heart and pressed it to his lips, imparting the knowledge of a sap that purged fevers overnight. At dawn, he hunted for that flower in the grove's secret clearing, guided only by the echo of its fragrance in his memory. And there it stood, shy and vibrant, its scent a perfect match. He gathered it carefully, thanked the spirits in whispered prayers, and carried the bloom back to his hut for testing. Dreams are the shaman's first laboratory. He sleeps on mats woven from palm, and vine, listening to the night chorus of frogs and owls, letting their rhythms steer his subconscious. In sleep, he visits ancestral kitchens, long wooden tables lined with bowls of powders and tinctures, and watches as elders stir steaming decoctions. They gesture with gnarled fingers toward a fern whose juice clears infections, or a moss that softens scar tissue. He awakens with fragments of song stuck in his throat and images flickering behind his closed eyelids, and he knows where to search the following day. The next sunrise finds him barefoot in damp leaf litter, following impulses born in dreams. Each pattern in the undergrowth becomes a map, a zigzag of termite trails leading to fungus with pain-easing alkaloids, a moss-clad log marking a patch of sedative roots. He kneels and presses his fingertips into the earth, feeling the vibration of roots huddled beneath the soil. He plucks a strand of root, rubs it between thumb and forefinger, and inhales its aroma, a compound so pungent it makes his eyes water. Immediately, he senses its strength, a medicine for coughs, learned not from textbooks, but from the forest's own counsel. Ritual smoke clears the path for deeper communion. Hollowed gourds filled with crushed leaves are set alight, sending curling plumes of fragrant blue haze into the night air. The shaman waves a feather fan, directing the smoke over his body in sweeping arcs, each pass an invocation of the element associated with that plant air for cedarwood, water for psychoactive mushrooms, fire for resinous sap. As the smoke touches his skin, he feels a chill followed by warmth, as if elemental forces are whispering instruction down his spine. Which part of the plant to use, how long to boil, how many mouthfuls to administer. He hums to the plants, two simple melodies passed down through generations. Each species has its song, a tune that unlocks its essence. The lute-shaped leaf of the coca plant resonates with a slow, rising hum that echoes heartbeats. The curling petals of the morning glory answer with a trill that shudders through the ribs. The bark of the quince tree replies in a deep drone like footsteps in a cave. When he sings the right melody, the plant spirit stirs visibly at the periphery of his vision. A quivering of petals, a shimmer along the vein patterns, a sudden, fleeting flash of color. It is in that resonance that the shaman finds clarity. Community rituals solidify these revelations. Under a canopy of stars, Villagers gather in concentric circles around the shaman. He pours the visionary brew into wooden cups, passing them one by one. As each person sips, they close their eyes and embrace the gentle darkness. In time, moans of wonder ripple through the circle hands raise, pointing to shapes no one else sees. A twisting vine heaped with glowing fruit, a pair of wings hovering over a sick child. The shaman listens to their accounts, weaving them into a growing tapestry of insight. He records which visions correlate with relief, who felt warmth spreading in swollen joints, who experienced dreams of cleaner breathing, who awoke the taste of sweetness in their mouth. Each account refines his understanding. Even the simplest plant may speak volumes. When a woman arrives with a rattlesnake bite, the shaman crushes the milky sap of the dragon's blood tree into a poultice. He presses it onto the swollen flesh while humming the plant's hymn. Instantly, he feels feedback, a tightening in his chest. The same constriction he sees mirrored in the patient's limb. The sap pulses against his palms, urging him to add a pinch of powdered bark to avoid blood clotting. He does so, and as silence settles, the swelling begins to recede. The jungle itself seems to exhale, acknowledging the communion that led to this cure. Visions, dreams, and smoke ceremonies are not fanciful theatrics. They are systematic methods of inquiry. Over centuries, shamans have refined protocols. The time of day to harvest a leaf when dew still clings, the lunar phase for collecting roots during the waning moon, the number of rattles before closing a ritual, 7 for completeness. They teach apprentices to keep dream journals etching sketches of colors and shapes, annotating tastes and bodily sensations. Each entry becomes a data point. Blue glow in dreams correlates with relaxation. Prickling on the tongue signals analgesic potential. Rustling sounds presage anti-inflammatory effects. Rituals are therefore both sacred and scientific. The shaman's trance is a biofeedback device, revealing biochemical interactions as felt experience. A vine that induces gentle nausea also cleanses parasites. A mushroom that dissolves grief soothes neural inflammation. By tuning his consciousness to the plant's signal, the shaman deciphers these links before isolating compounds in mortar and pestle. His laboratory is the body itself, its molecular responses charted through sweat, shivers, tears, and laughter. And when the shaman returns to the waking world, he brings back more than anecdote. He carries living specimens, fresh samples bound in palm sheath. In the morning light, he tests infusions, measuring color, viscosity, and scent. He prepares small doses for trusted villagers, observing reactions, adjusting methods. Each positive result is celebrated with offerings. A handful of tobacco tossed into the fire, a prayer painted on the hut's wall, a night of songs in honor of the plant whose guidance proved true. Thus communal knowledge grows, anchored in both spirit and substance. Some plant spirits, however, remain elusive. The shaman may spend nights shrouded in leaves, repeating chants that last until dawn, seeking a vision that never comes. Vines twist and coil, but offer no flower. Roots yield clear water instead of resin. These failures remind him of humility, that not every secret is meant to be revealed, and that the forest holds some knowledge as a test of respect rather than a gift. He withdraws those species from trials, allowing them undisturbed regrowth, honoring them in silence. Through this ongoing dialogue, shamans cultivate a living pharmacopoeia. They learn that healing properties are not static, but dynamic, varying by season, soil, rainfall, even the temperament of the plant itself. A vine harvested after a thunderstorm may be twice as potent. A leaf picked under a new moon might carry gentler energies. The shaman's art lies in discerning these subtleties, blending intuition with observation to craft remedies that heal body and spirit alike. In the hush that follows each ritual, as dawn breaks once more through palm and bark, the shaman sits quietly among empty gourds and cooling embers. He closes his eyes, feeling the residual hum of plant voices echoing in his veins. though the world around him resumes its clamor birds calling, insects droning, villagers stirring. He carries a silence within, a sacred echo of that communion. It is in that silent space that the spirits of nature continue to speak, guiding him ever deeper into the hidden medicines of the green world. A low, steady glow fills the healer's hut at dawn, its earthen walls heavy with the scent of last night's fires and the sharp tang of crushed leaves. A half-dozen shamans sit in a loose circle, gourds of steaming decoctions arrayed before them like offerings. They cradle bent sticks for stirring, and their eyes bright with expectation shift from one bubbling vessel to the next. Today is an alchemy of hope and caution, the testing of a newly discovered root whispered to ease deep lung congestion. But before any remedy can be declared safe, it must survive the crucible of trial, the exacting scrutiny passed down through generations. The earliest experiments began in solitude. A lone shaman centuries ago ventured deep into a swampy grove and found a thick-knotted rhizome with fibrous tendrils. He tasted a sliver of raw flesh and felt a slow burn in his throat, an ominous warning. He spat it out and washed his mouth with river water, only to discover hours later that his fever had waned. Elated, he returned home clutching his prize, but in his jubilation, he misjudged dosage. He pulverized too much for his apprentice's first test, and the young man writhed and cramped so fierce that the forest itself seemed to echo his agony. The village watched in silent horror until the shaman's antidote, a blend of plantains and honey, brought the apprentice back from the brink. That near tragedy became legend, retold in song and caution. Each verse carried a lesson. Respect potency, start small, record every twitch and shiver. For centuries, every apprentice memorized that ballad before ever touching mortar or pestle. It opened the oral pharmacopoeia, an endless ledger of triumphs and failures, bound by melody rather than ink. And it ensured that the rhizome's power was never misjudged again. Over the years, countless such trials wove themselves into the living tradition. Shamans learned to balance bitterness and sweetness by sight and taste. The deeper the brown in a decoction, the more concentrated its alkaloids. The sharper the tang on the tongue, the closer to toxicity. They timed harvests by the sun's arc roots pulled at dawn, held more moisture, and yielded milder compounds, while those dug at dusk were tougher, drier, and more potent. One misstep a root harvested on a damp, overcast morning led to a brew so weak it failed to halt fevers, and villagers took ill again. That failure was not discarded in shame, but woven into a story of the clouded moon, teaching all to respect the sky's influence on the earth below. Oral tradition thrived on these stories. Every evening, by firelight, elders sang a cyclical chant that listed plants, and their effects in order of potency. Garotu dries the cough, but too much dream will burn. Ipeka brings the purge, but heed its sting or life you'll spurn. Each line hinted at dosage, preparation method, and the spirit invoked during consumption. Apprentices learned to interpret pauses and inflections as risk flags, a lengthened syllable here, a sudden staccato there. By the time they completed their tutelage, these verses were etched into their bones, guiding hands and hearts when they stood alone before a mortar. Trial and error was never random. Shamans devised protocols for testing new medicines, mirroring steps that modern scientists would recognize. Observation, hypothesis, small-scale trial, replication, and mythic codification. First came the sniff. Test-dried leaves were crushed and inhaled, and the nose judged potency. A fleeting warmth in the chest below the sternum signaled a promising anti-inflammatory. A sudden chill warned of neurotoxic properties. Next, a tiny nibble often no larger than a grain of rice was tasted, followed by a day of vigilant watch. If no burning eyes, upset stomach, or altered vision followed, a second test occurred at dawn with double the dose. Only after 3 such graduated steps did the shaman deem a plant fit for ceremony. Failure at any step remained part of the collective memory. When a bitter sap induced stomach cramps so severe that the sufferer collapsed, the tale became a lesson in humility. The plant earned a new name, Chanteru, or maker of regret. Its use was limited to external poultices for insect bites, never ingested. A similar fate befell another vine, whose juice, once swallowed, clouded the mind for days. It was banished from consumption entirely, its only purpose to mark the boundaries of a forbidden grove where no healer dared tread. That grove itself became a living archive. Shamans left offerings at its edge, tobacco bundles, patterned feathers, bowls half filled with water as a silent pact. We remember your gift and your warning. Apprentices traveled there with mentors, learning both the allure and the danger held in tangled undergrowth. They studied the vine's blossoms, noting how they shone most vividly under moonlight, an enticing beacon for dreamers, but a trap for the unwary. These journeys, though perilous, reinforced oral lessons with first-hand experience. Tradition was layered like sediment. Younger shamans added refinements. A pinch of orange rind to temper bitterness, a handful of fresh basil leaves to smooth rough edges, or an extra hour of simmering to concentrate the essence. Each tweak was tested on a trusted few elders with robust constitutions, midwives postpartum, or hunters in need of musculoskeletal relief. Their feedback wick recovery, easier breathing, lessened joint pain became new verses in the communal songbook. Seasons, too, left their mark on tradition. Shamans watched how the rainy period transformed plant chemistry. Excess moisture diluted certain alkaloids, making bitter herbs unexpectedly tame. When the floods receded, roots stored starch and sugar deep within their fibers, yielding sweeter decoctions that soothed stomachs more than they stimulated. Elders cautioned against using those sweetened brews for fever reduction. They labeled them comforters rather than purifiers. Those nuances were passed by whisper, not as public decrees, but as gentle nudges during moonlit walks. Oral traditions also safeguarded secrets. Some remedies were shared only at designated times or with sworn pledges of silence. The medicine of heartworm, an intricate brew, combining 3 vines, a fungus, and a dried scale of a forest gecko, was revealed only to those initiated under a blue moon ceremony. Breaking that vow invited the forest's wrath, sudden fevers, nightmares of falling trees, and whispered warnings on the wind. Thus, the rarest cures remained cloaked in mystery, reserved for dire need. Beyond dosage and preparation, shamans encoded spiritual protocols into every recipe. A powder for night terrors required a chant to the owl spirit before administration. A tonic for childbirth demanded an offering to River Mother afterward. These rituals were not mere window dressing, but integral parts of the treatment. Shamans believed that neglecting the ceremony risked nullifying the medicine's power or even reversing its effect. Stories of powerless salves bark stripped without prayer served as cautionary tales, reinforcing the interdependence of material and spiritual practice. The apprentices absorbed these lessons at the master's side. They watched as the shaman recorded successes in the bark, inscribed ledger tree-lengthy strips of thin bark hung from a high branch, each scraped with symbols denoting plant name, effect, dosage, season, and ritual notes. The tree itself stood at the village center, its ribbons of writing fluttering like flags that told the living history of experimentation. At ceremonies, villagers read aloud older entries, recounting how a decoction of pakari seeds first eased the shaman's own fever 3 generations past, or how the burnt remains of banana stalk ash sealed wound dressing centuries ago. By the time an apprentice stood before the ledger tree, they had memorized dozens of entries. When the shaman scratched new marks on fresh bark, the apprentice responded, "I will honor this truth," and offered a leaf from a sacred shrub in return. That exchange bound knowledge to conscience, ensuring that no remedy was taken lightly. In this way, tradition was a living contract, renewed with every generation. Failures, too, were honored. When a plant lost potency, perhaps because of overharvesting or shifting soil composition, its entry was updated with a note, no longer true in the southern groves. A new verse was added to the chant. Where rivers shift and hands deplete, plant may weaken, other roots shall greet. This adaptability kept the pharmacopoeia alive, preventing it from calcifying into an outdated codex. As time passed, shamans noticed how environmental changes altered plant properties. A vine once potent in the lowlands grew bland in higher altitudes. A leaf prized for its calming effect in childhood caused dizziness when picked from older trees. In response, they developed categories: youth leaf, mature leaf, and elder leaf, each with its own dosage and ritual. Stories emerged of healers who misread these distinctions, treating an elder with youth leaf and causing fainting spells. These tales reinforced the need for precise language and guided careful observation. The process of trial and refinement was never hurried. Shamans allowed months or even years between major additions to the remedy roster. They observed how a cure performed across multiple seasons, in different bodies, and alongside other treatments. Only when results remained consistent did they celebrate the remedy's final induction into the community as core repertoire. In the hush before nightfall, the community gathered for the rite of renewal. Flames danced on suspended gourds, casting elongated shadows that flickered across the ledger tree's bark strips. Each shaman took a moment to place a new ribbon of fresh discovery from their own trials. Simultaneously, they cut away an outdated or dangerous remedy's strip, offering it to the fire so its ashes could return to the earth. Smoke spiraled upward, carrying old and new knowledge like back into the green world that nurtured them. Through this cycle of trial, error, and tradition, the shamans forged a pharmacopoeia as vast and intricate as the jungle itself. It was a living tapestry of human curiosity and humility, a testament to centuries of listening, testing, and retelling. Within every song and every bark-inscribed entry lay the echoes of hands that pounded, tasted, earned, and blessed. The medicines they crafted carried not just chemical compounds, but the weight of stories, ceremonies, and the unbroken chain of generations who dared to learn from both success and failure. Tonight, as embers glow and drums beat a steady pulse, the shamans close the circle. Their voices weave the old chants, merging cautionary tales with hymns of potency. The hut hums with collective wisdom, each verse a thread binding past to present. And in that sacred resonance, the forest listens ready to reveal the next trial, the next error, and the next truth to be enshrined in the living archive of tradition. A single beam of dawn light slips through the canopy, landing on a leaf so vividly mottled it seems to glow. Veins radiate like a network of crimson rivers against vibrant green, and the shaman kneels to trace the pattern with an outstretched finger. Here begins the silent dialogue. This plant announces itself as a healer of blood disorders, its red-streaked foliage a promise writ in living tissue. The shaman's eyes narrow, drinking in every nuance of hue and contour, for the forest speaks in colors and shapes that hint at purpose. From earliest memory, shamans learned to see plants not as inert matter, but as words in a vast, living language. A bulbous root that burrowed deep beneath the soil wore scales like the hide of an armadillo armor for digestive ailments. The shaman surmised defenses that would protect the gut lining. Along riverbanks, he noted vines with leaves shaped like fishtails, and understood these to aid kidney function, because fish dwell where water flows, clarifying toxins. Each form, each texture, each glossy sheen carried semantic weight. Shapes spoke as loudly as colors. The heart-shaped leaf of the passion flower vine was no accident of design, but a celestial signature pointing to cardiac use. Shamans discovered that infusions of its petals soothed palpitations, its cupped outline mirroring the human heart's rhythm. They whispered of the doctrine of signatures, The belief that the Creator marked each plant with telltale signs, a groove, a spurt of sap, a cluster of hairs, to guide those with eyes to see. In this code, abbreviations told whole stories: lobed leaves for liver, star shapes for respiratory systems, spiral tendrils for neurological pathways. Animal behavior served as footnotes in this script. Early one morning, a troop of monkeys descended upon a stand of white blooming shrubs after a night of feverish calls. The shaman watched from the shadows as the primates chewed the bark, then climbed languidly higher, their breathing easing. At dawn, he tasted the powdered bark himself and found warmth spreading in his chest. The fever gentled. From then on, he called it Monkey's Comfort, teaching his apprentices to observe which creatures fed on which plants when ailments struck, for the forest's creatures were intuitive pharmacists. Bees offered another kind of margin note, where they clustered in great swarms around tiny yellow flowers. Shamans deduced both antiseptic and energizing properties. Honey drawn from those blooms carried a subtle tang of citrus and a rush of clarity, making it a remedy for septic wounds and for minds muddled by grief. The shaman mapped bee flight paths at dawn, noting the precise locations of hidden groves. He followed the hum to blooms that opened only at first light and harvested petals in dewy hours, ensuring the medicine captured both floral essence and latent pollen's potency. Color gradations within a single plant revealed layered benefits. A leaf bearing purple at its tip, fading to green at its base, suggested dual functions. Purple as connection to detoxification in the shaman's lexicon, greens linked to nourishment. He brewed the upper leaves for liver cleanses and the lower ones as nutrient-rich broths for the weak. Apprentices learned to slice leaves along their gradient, extracting each segment separately. Over time, this precision yielded targeted remedies that worked faster and with fewer side effects than blunt concoctions of whole leaves. Texture told its own tales. Velvety undersides hinted at emollient properties. The soft hairs trapped moisture, promising relief for dry, cracked skin. Shamans rubbed crushed velvet-backed leaves onto sores, marveling as redness receded beneath the plant's protective cloak. In contrast, waxy leaves with a slick surface betrayed waterproofing oils. Those they boiled into fumigations, the smoke clinging to mucous membranes, clearing sinuses, and easing chest congestion. The forest offered every texture as a clue, if one only cared to touch, to feel its hidden message. Early explorers noted that certain flowers only opened at dusk, their petals revealing ghostly white forms veined with silver. The shaman recognized these moonflowers as sedatives, resonating with lunar rhythms. Gathered under the silver light, their nocturnal fragrance was distilled into teas that brought deep, dream-rich sleep. Likewise, blooms that closed at sunset but opened with sunrise were daylight tonics, combating lethargy and strengthening the spirit for daily toil. The timing of a flower's opening became part of its signature. The sound plants made in the wind also informed use. High-pitched whistles from grasses in open clearings suggested analgesic potential, the thin blades slicing the breeze like small needles. Shamans learned to crush those blades into poultices for headaches, allowing the leaf's vibration to harmonize with cranial pressure. Broad palms that rustled deeply at dusk spoke of anti-inflammatory strength, their low groans woven into a poultice for swelling joints. The forest's ambient orchestra was a symphony of pharmacology. Seasonal shifts altered the script. Young leaves in spring, soft and pale, held concentrated chlorophyll, but less bitter toxins, making them ideal for gentle cleanses. More mature leaves, turning slightly yellow or bronze at summer's end, accumulated alkaloids potent enough to stop internal bleeding. Shamans charted these seasonal signatures on bark tablets hung in the forest's heart, revisiting each grove at precise intervals to gather materials at peak potency. A delay of weeks could mean the difference between a medicine's success and failure. Symbolism extended into ritual presentation. When delivering a decoction, The shaman shaped cups from freshly hollowed gourds, each inscribed with the likeness of the source plant. The wearer held subtle energies of the plant through the vessel's carved form, amplifying the medicine's message before the first sip. The patient saw not just a bitter brew, but the relief embodied in that carved leaf motif, forging a psychological bridge between observation and outcome. In this synergy of symbol and substance lay healing's greatest power. The shaman's apprentice learned to read shifting hues in drying herbs. Red petals desiccated too quickly, losing their anthocyanins and healing strength, while pale petals dried unevenly, becoming brittle and less effective. Only by watching the color as slow fade, an almost imperceptible shift in the hour before full dryness, could they harvest at the perfect moment. These lessons passed down in whispered instruction, for slight mistakes could tip a remedy from cure to poison. Myth reinforced these botanical codices. An ancient tale told of a tree whose bark mirrored the pattern of crocodile skin. Villagers once rubbed its sap on their feet to ward off disease in river crossings, the bark's crocodilian texture symbolically turning danger into protection. Another legend spoke of a vine curling like a snake's coil. Its juice was used to treat joint stiffness, the serpent's sinuous shape embodying the promise of renewed flexibility. These stories were more than allegory. They were mnemonic devices, anchoring medicinal knowledge in vivid imagery. The shaman's eyes became finely tuned instruments. He noted minute shifts, a glint of orange in a flower center, a slight flare of red at leaf margins, a dark spot near a bud's base. Each color variant whispered new uses. Orange's solar warmth for digestive tonics, red's inner fire for circulatory stimulants, dark spots hint at concentrated resin for pain relief. Apprentices practiced sketching these details in charcoal on palm leaves, refining their visual memory until sketches served as maps to hidden medicines. Plant lineage offered cues as well. Related species often shared similar signatures. The clan of mints, their serrated leaves and cooling oils, pointed shamans to digestive and respiratory treatments. Shrubs belonging to the nightshade family, with their glossy berries and alkaloid, rich sap, were treated with caution, beneficial at low doses, but toxic if misjudged. Shamans categorized each family under broad emotional and physical associations: mints for calm, nightshades for transition and transformation. This taxonomy simplified an otherwise overwhelming pharmacopoeia. Water's role in revealing signatures cannot be overstated. The way droplets beaded on leaves, whether forming perfect spheres or absorbing into the surface, spoke of hydrophobic or hydrophilic compounds. Leaves that repelled water were boiled longer to extract oils. Leaves that soaked up moisture suffused their juices swiftly, warranting shorter infusions. Apprentices tested each new leaf with a few drops of water before deciding on a preparation method, embedding empirical scrutiny within the spiritual practice. The shaman's own body became a living dictionary. He carried small test samples pressed against his wrist, noting warmth, itching, or cooling sensations. A quick tingle spoke of stimulant properties. A slowdown of pulse hinted at sedative potential. Over years, his skin remembered each change. When a villager arrived with a complaint aching muscles, a racing heart, a hollow ache in the chest, he could match the symptom to a tactile memory and retrieve the plant that spoke most clearly to that sensation. No two forests communicated exactly the same language. Shamans traveling from one region to another recalibrated their lexicon. A yellow-flowered shrub in the west might signal digestive relief, while its eastern cousin, with paler blooms, offered anti-parasitic powers. Glossy leaves in one biome implied perspiration control. In another, it indicated water retention. Apprentices learned to relearn, questioning previous assumptions and opening themselves to each forest's unique grammar. Even decay spoke. Fallen logs carpeted in white fungal growth whispered of antimicrobial strength. Shamans crushed those fungi into pastes for wound dressings and gagged at the bitter tang, knowing that the bitter was the medicine. Rotting fruit covered in bright orange mold told of lactobacillus activity, inspiring the fermentation of soursop seeds into digestive aids. The forest as cycle of death and renewal offered insights as vital as those gleaned from living leaves. In time, the shaman's library swelled with hundreds of coded entries. He stitched together a tapestry of signs: color, shape, behavior, symbols, so that a single glance at a previously unknown plant often yielded a clear hypothesis of its use. Apprentices watched this process, awed at how a glance at a leaf as edge or a glimpse of an animal as feeding frenzy could unlock centuries of hidden wisdom. And yet, the greatest lesson was humility. The forest's language was spoken in dialects that shifted with soil, sky, and season. Sometimes a plant would defy expectations, its signature words scrambled by drought or flood. Shamans learned to listen anew each harvest, to test hypotheses with cautious respect, and to accept when a silent pause, no color flare, no animal interest, meant a plant had no gift to offer at that time. Under vaults of green, the shaman's heartbeat aligned with leaf pulses and bird calls, attuned to the living script of the jungle. Every season brought new chapters, every rainfall a fresh vocabulary. And in reading these signs, heedful of color, shape, creature, and myth, he crafted medicines that spoke directly to the ailments of both flesh and spirit. In that communion, the forest as language became a living testament to healing woven from the earth's own code. A hush falls over the clearing as the first brave soul steps forward, a small bundle of roots tied in a strip of palm fiber clutched in trembling hands. Night's darkness presses in from all sides, the firelight flickering against the faces of gathered villagers, each pair of eyes reflecting a mix of hope and fear. They have come seeking relief, a fever that rages through half the hamlet, leaving bodies racked with chills and delirium. But to find the cure, someone must taste what no one has tried before. From the time of earliest forest dwellers, shamans understood that every medicine hides risk beneath its gift. A root that soothes may also burn. A leaf that clears the mind may shatter reality. And yet they pressed forward, guided by the belief that within danger lay salvation. As the apprentice grinds the fresh tuber between flat stones, the shaman's drumbeat slows, each thump a reminder of the fragile thread between life and death. The root's surface is mottled dark purple blotches on pale flesh-like bruises on a body. It gives off a sharp, acrid scent when cut, a warning whispered in chemical language. The apprentice slices a razor-thin sliver and places it on his tongue, eyes wide. A dull throb begins behind his eyes, pulses echoing in his skull. The shaman watches intently, hand resting on the drum, listening not just to sound but to the shifts in the apprentice's breath. Moments pass. The apprentice's color drains. His limbs tremble. A low groan escapes his lips as nausea sweeps through him like a fierce wind. Villagers step back, faces turning pale. If this were a lesser healer, panic might spread. But the shaman raises his hand, chanting a soothing mantra taught by his elders, an invocation of the vine spirit, protector, and guide. He pours water over crushed leaves of the nearby passion vine, mashing them into a poultice. The apprentice clutches it to his chest, closing quivering eyes. Soon the tremors ease, replaced by a cold sweat. The fever subsides, and within hours the apprentice opens his eyes, finding breath easy and vision clear. This trial freed them to use the root for coughs that raged through winter nights. But not every experiment ended so well. In another village, deeper beneath the unbroken canopy, a shaman gathered leaves said to glow faintly under the full moon. Legend held that they cured convulsions. He brewed a tea from those silver-veined leaves and sipped it at midnight. At first, he felt a pleasant warmth, not unlike the comfort of a lover's embrace. But as the moon drifted across the sky, reality slipped away. He saw vines entwined with his own limbs, heard whispers urging him deeper into the jungle. Under their spell, he wandered. Days later, hunters found him along the riverbank, skin pale and clammy, eyes glassy. He spoke in riddles of serpent kings and ancient waters, unable to recall even his own name. Only through the countermeasure of crushed guava leaves and hours of drumming ceremonies did he recover enough to stand. And though he survived, he never drank the moonlit tea again. Its hallucinogenic power was recorded in the ledger tree with a new verse warning. Silver glow of midnight leaf mind ensnares, body thief. Risk often came from the unexpected. A vine with milky sap, tested to staunch bleeding, on one occasion caused crimson welts across the skin and its tester. His torso swelled as if an unseen force gripped his heart. The shaman's breath caught, for the pulse of life flickered in that body. In desperation, he cut open the villager's sleeve and smeared crushed plantain pulp over the rash, chanting words of cooling and release. The welts receded, but the vine's true power anticoagulant, rather than coagulant, remained hidden until that near-death ordeal. Only then did they learn to boil its sap to break down the harmful enzymes before use. Tales of poison became cautionary legends. Mothers hushed children with stories of hunters who had chewed the wrong berry. They spoke of a solitary man who, in fevered desperation, drank water poured over a cluster of scarlet fruits berries, so intoxicating that they dissolved his mind in delirium. For nights he danced, half-naked, through the village, roaring like a jaguar until dawn. By sunrise, he was gone vanished into the forest, leaving only bloodied footprints and a single berry at the forest's edge. Yet even tragedy held lessons. From the hunter-esque story emerged a new protocol. Never harvest berries without first observing which creatures fed on them. When curious squirrels voraciously devoured a berry cluster without harm, shamans felt it safe to taste. If animals convulsed or fled, they marked the plant as a hazard, preserving it only for insect repellents or dyes never ingestion. Sometimes the danger lurked in the smallest veins. A leafy sprout, no bigger than a thumb, tested first as a poultice for insect bites burned skin so severely that the shaman had to bandage his own hands for weeks. Villagers spoke of his white-knuckled fervor, the soot from his smoky fumigations clinging to scars, a reminder of the price paid for knowledge. When the root's resin was finally tested internally, it quelled arthritis but caused temporary blindness, an effect they learned to counterbalance with a second infusion of wild ginger. This dual remedy became one of the most potent joint healers, but only because they endured the blind trial and found the antidote. Danger showed the limits of ritual as well. A ceremony intended to protect a tester from malefic spirits once backfired. The drum's rhythm grew too fast, the chants too frantic, and the spirits invoked became agitated. The tester shattered his gourds in panic and ran barefoot through thorny underbrush, cutting his legs until sunrise before collapsing. The next day, the shaman rewrote the protective chant, slowing the tempo, softening the words. He tested it on himself first, feeling the shift in spirit energy settle like a calm breeze, before using it again in trials. Poisonous plants hid in plain sight. The shaman's apprentice might walk past a patch of innocuous-looking herbs, unaware that a single crushed leaf could paralyze the tongue within minutes. Apprentices were taught to never underestimate a plant's duplicity. One with edible-looking yellow flowers might conceal glycosides that shut down the heart. To guard against this, they first applied a tiny smear to the inner elbow. No reaction after an hour meant a cautious nibble of leaf. This multi-stage testing became the backbone of safe experimentation, but only after generations had endured lost tongues and silent screams. Even ancestry could mislead. A vine believed to share lineage with a known healing species later proved to be a toxic cousin. It caused violent tremors in those who brewed it, as if unseen hands convulsed their muscles. An entire night of drumming and prayers barely revived the shaman who had dared to test it. And in that liminal state, he received a vision. The vine spirit, heartbroken by humanity's greed, would only share its gift if approached with humility. Thus a new ceremony was devised, kneeling on cool stones beneath a crescent moon, offering fresh water to the earth before harvesting. Only then did the vine's decoction yield a potent antiseptic without convulsions. In the crucible of error, oral traditions crystallized. Songs memorialized fatal outcomes. One mournful chant told of the healer's wife who brewed a flower said to cure grief, but instead induced mania. She wandered the forest for 3 days, weaving blankets from vines, speaking only in the tongue of the were-vine, an experience so harrowing that no shaman dared brew that flower again. Its petals now served only as hallucinogenic aids in divination ceremonies, never as remedies for sorrow. Risk extended beyond ingestion. Inhalation trials could induce asphyxiation if the fumes were too dense. The shaman prepared smoke from a resinous root under a woven palm hood, his apprentice beneath a second hood. The apprentice's breathing slowed, eyelids drooped, and the shaman was forced to tear away the hood, saving him from suffocation. In gratitude, they recorded a new warning. Resinous roots, smoke with care-hooded breath is open prayer. From that moment, all inhalation tests began with a single breath, watched over by 2 helpers standing ready. Some shamans offered their own bodies as the first test. An elder who had cured 100 fevers used his flesh as a vessel, consuming potent decoctions that would kill any but the purest of spirit. His body served as a living litmus test each trial, marked by his own scars and stories. He believed that as the oldest healer, his life was owed to the forest, and he repaid that debt by risking it time and again. When he passed beyond sight, his bloodline of wisdom was written into the bark of his favorite kapok tree, its hollowed trunk storing dried bundles of every plant he had tested. Yet, martyrdom was not the ultimate goal. Instead, these dangerous discoveries forged a deeper relationship with the green world. Shamans learned to read unspoken cues. A slight pulsation in a leaf's edge, a subtle shimmer in resin when the sun struck at dawn, an unearthly hum in the air after rain. Each danger taught them humility, respect, and the necessity of meticulous testing protocols. In the long mornings that followed each dangerous night, shamans gathered to refine methods. They built new instruments, stone graters for finer powders, woven strainers to filter out harmful fibers, wooden molds for precise dosage. They painted charts on cured palm leaves, mapping each plant's reaction profile. Villagers visited the shaman's hut, not just for cures, but to witness the careful steps of trial, error, and mitigation. Their confidence in healing grew, rooted in the transparency of process and the tangible stories of survival. Today, the legacy of these perilous experiments lives on. Modern ethnobotanists owe their breakthroughs to the centuries of dangerous discoveries by forest healers. Every compound isolated in laboratories, every painkiller, antibiotic, or anti-malarial, echoes the near-fatal trials of shamanic pioneers. And though we can now measure doses with precision instruments, the core lesson remains unchanged. Within each unknown root leaf or resin lies both poison and cure, separated only by respect, rigor, and the willingness to face danger in the name of healing. As dawn breaks once more over the ancient pharmacopoeia, the forest stands silent witness. Its roots twist deep into the earth, its leaves shimmer with dew and possibility, and hidden within its vast green corridors, the next dangerous discovery waits, for a brave soul to taste, for a shaman to guide, and for hope to emerge from the thin line between peril and miracle. A hushed stillness blankets the clearing as twilight's last glow slips behind distant palms, and the first ember of the communal fire winks into being. The air hangs heavy with damp earth and dampened hum of cicadas settling into night's lullaby. At the center of a circle of woven mats sits the shaman, body painted in spirals of white clay and red ochre, eyes closed in silent communion. Before him, a long strip of vine-thick, bark-like, twisted as the coils of a sleeping serpent hangs beside bundles of glossy green leaves tied with fibers of chambira palm. Tonight it will become ayahuasca, vine of the soul, the sacred brew that opens doors invisible to the waking mind. Hands steady, the shaman strips sections of the Banisteriopsis copy vine, scraping away its rough outer layer to reveal the pale core within. Each shaving falls like curled ribbon into a carved wooden bowl. He crushes the vine against a stone with rhythmic patience, murmuring low notes of an ancient Ekaros medicine songs, taught by the jungle's own voices. With every chant, the air seems to pulse, as if tree trunks themselves have begun to listen. When the vine is reduced to fibrous threads, he retrieves the chacuna leaves, Psychotria viridis pale, and veined like moonlight, caught in green. He steams them briefly over smoldering coals to soften their fibers, then pounds them into a paste so vivid it seems to glow. Water from the river, cool as early morning, is poured over the mash, dribbling into a clay pot nestled in hot stones. The mixture simmers slowly, steam curling into rituals of prayer. The shaman's voice rises and falls in time with the hiss of boiling, weaving invocations to the ayahuasca mother, the spirits of the vine who dwell in twisted root and leaf. Villagers settle around him, forming tight rings of expectation hunters seeking clarity of aim, mothers seeking relief for a child's chronic cough, elders longing for dreams of ancestors. Each will sip the brew and journey inward, seeking not only healing, but knowledge. Which plants to harvest, where to find cures, how to mend wounds of both flesh and spirit. As the newcomer to this ceremony, you receive your cup, a hollowed gourd carved with winding serpents, and that bitter, earthy liquid inside glints like dark amber. The first sip is an act of surrender, acrid on the tongue, thick on the throat, pulling at the walls of the stomach like a silent anchor. The shaman's drum begins its slow heartbeat, each beat widening the circle of darkness and drawing all ears into that steady pulse. He sings an aikaro you do not yet understand, its melody rising like steam through branches, guiding your awareness downward into your core. Moments later, warmth unfurls in your belly, spreading like molten gold through veins and sinew. The ground underfoot seems to breathe in time with your heartbeat. Shapes at the edge of vision shimmer branches bending into living serpents, leaves forming silent tongues that lick at the air. The fire becomes a living entity, its embers flickering faces of old healers, their eyes bright with knowledge. You close your own eyes and let the vision deepen, drifting with the current of dream. In that liminal space where self and forest merge, you hear a voice both inside and all around. Soft rustling like new leaves opening, distant drum beats echoing through canyon-deep dreams. The ayahuasca mother speaks in images. She leads you through corridors of green, corridors lined with trees whose bark pulses in heartbeat patterns, whose sap drips luminous tears that soothe fevered skin. A jaguar emerges from shadow, its fur rippling in fractal patterns that mirror leaf veins. In its gaze, you see a map of hidden valleys, where grows a mushroom that stops bleeding and a bromeliad whose nectar cures infection. The jaguar tilts its head, and you know, you are meant to find these. Your vision shifts. Now you stand beside a stream of luminous water, cupped in your hands. The churning current speaks of flow of sap and vines, of blood and veins, of knowledge from spirit to flesh. You kneel and drink deeply, tasting every molecule of insight. The exact time to gather bark from the mahogany tree, the precise moon phase for harvesting flowers of the giant passion vine for sleep-inducing teas, the secret of fermenting fruits to yield medically potent enzymes. You sense the forest's consent, as if every drop you swallow binds you to its will and wisdom. In the darkness, you convulse once, twice, as your body purges what must be expelled. Vomit comes like a release, carrying toxins and old grief, a cleansing rite deeper than any wash of water. Villagers watch with solemn respect. They know this purge is part of the medicine. When the tremors cease, a profound stillness follows, thicker than the night itself. You breathe in that silence, tasting gratitude on each inhalation. The shaman's voice re-enters your awareness through the haze, gentle, guiding, singing you back step by step. Fingers touch your shoulder, drawing you upward. Your eyes open to see concentric circles of candlelight dancing on painted faces, each echo of flame a small ally in this return. The firelight seems softer, kinder than before, and every person in the circle holds their breath as you exhale the last echo of the journey. In the dawn that follows, you gather stalks of new plants based on the visions granted. The shaman leads you by footpaths through dew-slick leaves, pointing to the specific clump of moss at a cave's edge, the exact fern unfurling beside a limestone outcrop. You pick discreetly, thanking each plant in low tones, gathering only enough so that life can replenish. In the final light of morning, back at the hut, you watch the shaman prepare a fresh infusion, this time a healing tea for the village's wounded, now empowered by the knowledge he gained under ayahuasca's guidance. Beyond ayahuasca, shamans brew other visionary medicines, seeds of the small tobacco tree roasted into snuff that unveils the flight of spirit birds, minced bark of the virola tree dried into a pungent powder that summons ancestral counsel, smoked resins that open the listener to wind spirits, whose breath clarifies respiratory ills. Yet it is the ayahuasca ceremony that stands apart, a deliberate surrender of ego, a guided descent into the living pharmacy where spirits reveal cures that no mortal mind could devise alone. These rituals follow strict protocols. The night before, participants fast on water and plantain, purifying body and mind. They refrain from salt, sex, and conflict, creating a vessel of calm receptivity. At the circle's edge, offerings are placed bananas for the earth spirits, tobacco leaves for the wind spirits, honey for the water spirits, and the shaman invokes each in turn, dedicating the ceremony to the balance of all elements. The brew itself carries multiple names: Yage, Natema, Ayahuasca, each a dialectical echo of its universal role. Vine that binds, vine that illuminates, vine that heals. Men and women alike take part, each finding in the ceremony a reflection of their own need. Mothers grieving lost children seek visions that console and guide them toward remedies for broken hearts. Hunters pray for clarity of aim, yearning to perceive animal tracks invisible to the uninitiated. Healers, themselves apprentices and masters, drink to deepen their connection to the plant spirits, refining the pharmacopoeia with every encounter. Together, they form a living web of supplicants and guardians, each ceremony renewing the vital relationship between human and green world. Some visions defy description: geometric tunnels of color that hum with living code, cosmic serpents curling around bursting stars, ancestral faces woven from leaf patterns. In those visions, the shaman deciphers the spirit language of the forest, returning with words like Cachuaba and Sangre de Grotto, names that resonate with power beyond mere letters. He imparts these names to his apprentices, teaching them corresponding songs and handmade instruments, rattle gourds, feather fans, polished shells tools that amplify the voice of each plant. Not every journey grants clear instruction. Some participants drift into realms of shadow, confronting hidden fears or past transgressions. The shaman's role then shifts. He must guide them through the darkness, holding vigil until dawn, using chants and water to anchor them back to the living world. These trials, painful though they are, carry their own healing, unearthing blockages in psyche and community alike, exposing wounds that medicine must accompany with compassion. Morning ritual brings final closure. A cleansing steam bath scented with anti-inflammatory herbs washes away last traces of vision, grounding the body in warmth and water. Participants sip gentle teas made from lemongrass and peppermint, tasting calm after the brew's tumult. They retell fragments of their journeys beneath palm fronds, offering gifts of song, and whispered thanks to the ayahuasca mother. Each story seeds new understanding, expanding the shared map of the forest's hidden cures. As the sun climbs, the circle disperses, feet pattering along jungle trails. Some carry fresh bundles of leaves tied for infusion. Others clutch small pouches of powders sifted through ritual strainers. The shaman remains by the embers, adding new icaros to his repertoire, recording each revelation in the ledger tree's bark strips, names of newly discovered species, precise harvest instructions, moon phases, and dosage guidelines. This living archive grows thicker with every ceremony, ensuring the forest's generosity endures. In the hush that follows, the village returns to its daily rhythms, children's laughter echoing over clay pots, elders tending gardens, hunters sharpening arrows, but an undercurrent of awe persists. Everyone knows that somewhere beneath the canopy, vine and leaf hold mysteries unseen by day, secrets unveiled only through rituals woven of smoke and chant. And at the heart of those secrets stands the shaman, guardian of ayahuasca's doorway, interpreter of the spirit's medicine songs, guiding seekers deeper into the green cathedral, where healing begins in vision and culminates in living cure. A hush settles over the clearing as the first rays of dawn slip through the woven palm thatch, illuminating the shaman's hut with soft, golden light. He sits upon a mat of woven reeds, fingers tracing the faded symbols painted on the earthen floor spirals denoting breath. zigzag lines for blood, concentric circles for spirit. Before him lies the patient, a young mother whose cough has turned to tremors, whose fever is matched by dreams of falling through endless forests. Around them, family members stand watch, their faces etched with concern. They know that in this world, illness is never just flesh and bone. It is a fracture in the whole person, rippling through body and soul alike. Early in the morning, the shaman begins. He calls the patient's name 3 times, once for her body, once for her breath, once for her spirit, each repetition strengthening the bond between healer and healed. He sprinkles a handful of ground annatto seeds into a bowl of water, stirring until the liquid glows a soft orange. "Drink," he intones, "and let the color flow through you like sunrise, burning away the chills in your blood." The woman sips and shivers, tasting warmth that is both physical and symbolic, the color promised that vitality can return. But the work is only beginning. The shaman rises and moves behind the patient, placing both hands on her shoulders. He breathes in deeply, inhaling the patient's scent, a mixture of sweat, fever, and a faint undernote of fear. "Your body demands relief," he says softly, "but your spirit carries a wound." He closes his eyes and drums once on a hollow gourd, its tone deep and steady, a heartbeat bridging worlds. With each pulse, he draws the woman's essence upward, as if guiding her spirit to float above her body, twisted and tormented. "Tell me your sorrow," he urges, and in a voice soft and trembling, she speaks of loss of her own mother, who died in childbirth, and of guilt that her child lives only because another did not. This confession is as critical as any physical diagnosis. In tribal belief, disease often springs from spiritual imbalance. A neglected promise to a forest spirit, a broken taboo, a debt unpaid to the ancestors. The shaman listens, nods, then uncovers a bundle of white clay mixed with powdered bark. He paints a spiral on the patient's forehead, symbol of the journey inward, and then swirls lines down her arms and legs. "These marks will guide your spirit back to its center," he explains, "while the medicine restores your body." Next comes the steam bath. The shaman leads the woman to a small enclosure of green branches, lacing them together to form a domed sweat lodge. Inside, he places heated stones collected from a sacred river stones believed to hold Water Mother's memory of healing currents. He pours herbal infusions over the stones, fever-breaking guava leaves, antiseptic copaiba resin, calming lemongrass. The air sizzles, heavy with steam, and the patient crouches within, breath short but eyes alert. The warmth forces toxins through every pore, while the shaman chants low, rhythmic invoking wind spirits to carry away pain and sorrow alike. Outside the lodge, the patient's husband and children circle, drumming softly to hold the patient's anchor in the physical world. They chant in unison, "Fat and feathers, flesh and bone, take her sorrow, bring her home." Their voices weave with the shamans, creating a living net of sound that binds back any stray fragments of soul. When the patient emerges, sweat beads on her skin like dewdrops as she gasps for cool air. The shaman wraps her in a blanket woven from softened vines and fern fibers, singing a lullaby his grandmother taught him, a song said to soothe both womb and heart. After rest, the patient receives her final medicine, a bitter tea brewed from the root of the cat's claw vine and sweetened with honey for the spirit as comfort. She drinks in silence, eyes closed, tasting comfort and discipline together. The shaman watches her pulse slow, her breathing even. "Your body will heal over days," he says, "but your spirit needs weeks of tending. Continue the songs each dawn and visit the river tonight to offer thanks. Only when both body and soul are mended will you stand whole again." Healing in the jungle is never a solitary act. It involves the entire community. In the days that follow, neighbors visit the patient's hut, offering freshly ground plantains, bowls of soothing soups, and words of encouragement in ritualized tones. Children bring small flowers as symbolic remedies for joy. The patient's mother-in-law arrives with a feather fan to cool her fevered brow, fanning away illness as one might swat a lingering phantom. Each act, though simple, carries spiritual weight. Food symbolizes life's sustenance, speech carries blessings, touch transfers filial devotion. Sometimes illness demands more elaborate rites. When a child falls into fits of terror visions of snakes flashing behind the walls, the shaman performs a soul retrieval ceremony. He dances through the jungle, dripping hallucinogenic sap onto heated stones, his body painted in the braided patterns of ancestral guardians. The drum's rhythm accelerates until he enters trance and journeys inward, navigating a labyrinth of memories. There he finds the child's missing essence, trapped in a shell of fear, and calls it back with the song of the jaguar, the spirit guide for courage. Returning to the child's side, he blows tobacco smoke over the small body, sealing the soul's reunion and watching as the nightmares fade. Even wounds of war and conflict require holistic healing. When raiders clash and blood pours, the shaman sets aside medicines for physical wounds, poultices for lacerations, decoctions for infection, and turns to the task of reconciliation. He convenes both sides under a great ceiba tree, where each combatant recounts their griefs. The shaman sprinkles blessed water onto the circle, then mixes a communal drink from cacao and cassava wine. As each man drinks, he offers a confession of fear, anger, regret, then shakes hands with his former foe. The drink is not just a muscle relaxant. It is a binding force of communal spirit. Only when both physical and emotional wounds are named can genuine healing take root. Across seasons, shamans teach that the environment itself is an extension of the self. A drought might correlate to stagnant blood, a flood to pent-up sorrow. When crops fail, the shaman leads purification of the fields, sprinkling sacred powders, chanting to the seed spirits, planting new growth under auspicious constellations. These agricultural rituals are therapies not only for earth but for psyche, reminding the people that they share life's rhythms with leaf and river. Holistic belief also shapes prevention. Before anyone eats, they pause to give thanks 3 beats of the hand on the platter, an offering of tobacco placed in the dirt. This simple rite acknowledges that nourishment is both physical sustenance and spiritual partnership. When a traveler departs the village, they carry a handful of blessed herbs, sage to clear paths, basil for protection, annatto for vision. These charms guard body and spirit against the unknown. The most sacred holistic practice is the Council of Remembrance. Held once each moon cycle, it gathers elders, hunters, farmers, and healers around a fire ringed with stones. The shaman recounts recent ailments, who fell ill, how they recovered, what the medicine was. Together, they weave a communal ledger of health, adding new discoveries and renewing old knowledge. Songs are sung, dances performed, and offerings cast into the flames. In this forum, the lines between practitioner and patient blur. Everyone shares in the responsibility for each other's well-being, recognizing that a single person's illness is a thread loose in the communal tapestry. When the council ends, participants carry embers of fire back to their homes, tiny sparks in clay pots that keep the healing flame alive. A mother uses one to heat water for her daughter's bath. A hunter uses another to light his evening fire, scattering tobacco around his camp. In each act, the principle holds. Health is woven from the interplay of body, emotion, community, and the unseen realms. No cure is complete until each strand is mended. As the sun climbs high and the jungle chorus reprises its midday hymn, the patient emerges from her hut, cradling a bowl of cooling soup in one hand and a sprig of fresh mint in the other. Her steps are steady, her eyes bright with gratitude. She pauses at the riverbank to cast her thanks in tobacco leaves and water, whispering, "I am whole again." In that moment, the forest responds. A soft gust of wind ripples through the leaves. A flock of birds takes flight in unison, and the water's surface shimmers with ripples of blessing. Healing the body and the soul in this world is never a simple matter of medicine or prayer alone. It is an intricate dance of roots and chants, poisons and songs, tears and laughter. It demands that healer and healed meet as equals, that the community stand as witness, and that the living earth itself be honored as the greatest doctor of all. In this holistic belief, disease vanishes not only from flesh, but from the deeper realms of spirit, leaving the whole person body, mind, and soul once more in harmony with the rhythms of life. As dawn's first light filters through the canopy, the jungle stirs in gentle waves of sound. A troop of capuchin monkeys tumbles through the branches, their voices sharp and curious. One monkey pauses at a cluster of glossy green leaves, plucking them with delicate fingers and chewing slowly, as if savoring a hidden flavor. Nearby, a young healer soon to become a shaman watches in rapt silence, heart pounding with wonder. In that moment, he learns his first lesson, that animals, too, are teachers of medicine, guiding those who pay attention to nature's subtle curriculum. From that morning forward, the apprentice records every interaction he witnesses. He notes which creatures seek which plants when ill, and under what circumstances. He learns that sickness in the jungle often follows heavy rains. Parasites multiply in damp leaf litter, and fevers rise where stagnant pools collect. When a howler monkey coughs and reaches for the frilled bark of a nearby tree, the apprentice sees hope in its gesture. He tastes the bark himself and finds a gentle warmth spreading in his chest. Later, under the tulip tree's wide leaves, he kneads the bark into a paste and applies it to his own cough, marveling as each rasping breath smooths into ease. Monkeys lead the way in self-medication. Capuchins rub crushed citrus leaves into their fur to repel biting insects, their fur shining with essential oils that sting mosquitoes and midges. The apprentice gathers those very leaves at sunset, distilling them over hot stones into a poultice for villagers plagued by relentless swarms. When applied to the skin, the paste sings with citrus fragrance and stings as it seals pores, blocking insect bites for days. The lesson echoes: if a creature uses a plant against vermin, humans can adapt the remedy for stubborn pests that carry disease. In another grove, spider monkeys break off chonta palm fronds to craft satiny nests in trees. But when one breaks a bone or sprains a wrist, they chew backbone-shaped roots at the grove's edge. Intrigued, the apprentice follows their movements, tasting a sliver of fibrous root himself. He feels a subtle tightening in his joints, a promise of support. Back at the village, crushed root becomes a pressed poultice for sprains, reducing swelling overnight. Thus, the monkey's instinctive choice becomes a human medicine, born of keen observation. Yet not all animal teachers are primates. Jaguars, elusive masters of stealth, teach harder lessons. Shamans notice scratch marks on tree trunks where jaguars have sharpened claws and sniffed the scented bark. Those trees, it turns out, exude a resin with antimicrobial qualities. When the apprentice cuts a strip of bark and smokes it over coals, the smoke wards off airborne pathogens that cause chest infections. Villagers inhale the fragrant fumes, drawing deeper breaths as congestion eases. The jaguar as ritual serves a dual purpose, marking territory and preserving health, a lesson the apprentice weaves into his own ceremonies. Birds provide another chapter in this living library. Early one morning, macaws converge on clay licks along riverbanks, consume the chalky soil, and fly off renewed. The shamans deduce that the clay neutralizes toxins ingested with certain fruits during the flood season. They collect clay from the same licks, dry it, and grind it into a fine powder. When mixed into a decoction, it binds stomach poisons, sparing humans from raging dysentery. In ritual song, the shaman praises the macaws, their scarlet and yellow plumage, a beacon pointing to healing ground beneath their feet. Toucans, too, play their part. When drought parches the forest, fruit falls rotting to the earth, and toucans feast on fallen berries until their feathers ruffle with sickness. Afterward, they eat bright yellow flowers of the specific night-blooming vine, swiping petals across their drooping plumage and chewing bits for relief. The apprentice watches closely and later develops a tea from those petals that eases stomach cramps and purges toxins. The toucan's unconventional remedy becomes a cornerstone treatment during seasons of scarcity. Even insects instruct. Leaf-cutter ants carve perfect semicircles from tender leaves, haul them into nest chambers, and cultivate fungal gardens on their leaf piles. When the apprentice uncovers the fungus soft, pure white, with faint ridges, they taste it and find a mild bitterness that soothes sore throats. He dries samples and uses the powder to treat pharyngitis, marveling at the ant's agricultural wisdom and the fungus's antiseptic properties. Later, during a fever of urgent need, the apprentice's own throat burns with pain until he sprinkles the ant fungus powder into warm water. Inhaling the steam's fragrant relief, tapirs, lumbering through swamps, reveal cures for parasitic infections. When ticks burrow into their hide, tapirs roll in mud with a particular clay-rich composition and rub against tree trunks to shed the grime. Shamans harvest that same clay, crush it, and mix it into poultices applied to tick bites. It draws out inflammation and seals wounds, preventing bacterial infection. This lesson mud is medicine spreads to cover ailments from rashes to infected wounds. Even smaller creatures like frogs carry clues. A tree frog's neon skin warns of toxicity, yet some villagers ingest tiny smears of its milky secretions under shamanic guidance to treat high blood pressure. The apprentice observes the frog's behavior, how it perches low in damp hollows, exuding potent skin alkaloids as defense. In minute doses, those alkaloids dilate blood vessels. The preparation demands exacting skill. Too much can paralyze. Too little is ineffective, so the shaman crafts a ceremonial spoon from ivory palm and delivers a precise droplet to elders in need. This silent pact between frog and healer underscores respect for danger's threshold. Animal teachings extend to reptiles beyond frogs. Caimans nest by riverbanks, and shamans observe how caiman dung darkens after eating fish. When villagers mix burnt caiman shells into ointments, sores heal faster, hinting at calcium-rich healing. The apprentice studies this by exposing fish scales to slow fire, replicating the caiman's digestive process. The powdered scales, folded into clay salves, strengthen brittle bones, a remedy traced from reptile digestion to human need. Bats are unlikely tutors, but shamans watch them alight on banana stalks after long nights foraging. They nibble tender pith at the stalk's core, then flutter away. The pith contains both natural sugars and healing enzymes. The apprentice harvests banana pith, squeezes juice, and hands it to a hunter weary from tracking. The sugars restore energy. Enzymes aid digestion. Thus, the bat's midnight meal illuminates a daily tonic. Observations of caterpillars feed the pharmacopoeia in unexpected ways. Some caterpillars specialize on toxic leaves, sequestering plant poisons that make them unpalatable to predators. When heavy rains wash their droppings into puddles, tadpoles avoid those pools. Yet certain bird species wade into those waters and scratch at their feathers as if to dispel something. The apprentice deciphers the pattern. The droppings concentrate toxins that pests detest. He brews baths for livestock, mixing caterpillar droppings with water and bitter herbs, protecting animals from parasites. The subtlety of this lesson, indirect but profound, shows that animal behavior yields cures in layers. Each of these encounters deepens the apprentice's appreciation for the forest's interwoven life. He learns that healing clues do not reside solely in plants, but in the myriad relationships between species. The monkey's cough, the macaw's clay feast, the jaguar's bark scratch, all become chapters in a living manual. Through patient watchfulness, he composes a mosaic of signs that guides his own hunting for medicine. But it is more than observation. It is communion. Shamans teach that animals are emissaries of spirit realms, entrusted with knowledge too vital to hide. In ritual, the shaman dons feathered mantles or jaguar skin cloaks, embodying his teachers in ceremony. He chants invocations to the monkey spirit, the jaguar guardian, the toucan oracle, each song a tribute and a summons. In trance, he enters the spirit world, participating in animal councils where lessons are taught in dream languages beyond the reach of ordinary eyes. In one vision, the shaman finds himself on a rocky outcrop, watching a flock of parakeets pick at the blossoms of a hidden vine. The birds pluck only the central petals, leaving the fringes intact, a sign that the core contains the most potent resin. Awaking before dawn, the shaman journeys to that clearing, finds the vine, and confirms the vision's truth. He prepares an infusion from the central petals that heals scalp infections, mirroring the parakeet's selective feeding. In this way, the boundary between waking learning and visionary insight dissolves, animal behavior anchored in spirit revelations. Learning from animals is never risk-free. A tree frog's toxin can kill, and jaguar bark can break the heart if misused. Shamans test every lesson with rigorous protocols, tiny samples, careful dilution, slow escalation. An apprentice must first taste only after an animal's technique has been witnessed repeated times, ensuring the lesson did not spring from chance. Each success is celebrated with offerings: bananas for monkeys, clay discs for macaws, bloodfruit petals for caimans, tokens of gratitude to animal teachers. Through generations, these cumulative teachings yield astounding cures. Anti-malarial drinks traced to monkeys ingesting fever-reducing leaves, anti-inflammatory gels from frog steroids, anti-diarrheal clays perfected by macaw emulation. Modern ethnobotanists confirm these remedies active compounds, yet none could have emerged without the animal guides who first revealed their secrets. As the apprentice matures into shaman, he shares these stories in communal gatherings. By firelight, he recounts how the howler monkey's cough led to his first fever tonic, or how the jaguar's bark scratch unveiled an antiseptic smoke. Children listen with wide eyes, dreaming of the day they, too, will watch beasts in the forest, eager to decode the next lesson offered by nature's unwitting pharmacists. When the apprentice finally stands at the helm of healing, the animals remain his constant companions. He moves silently through the green halls, recognizing the footprints of jaguars, the chatter of monkeys, the flutter of toucans. Wherever he sees them feeding, resting, or cleansing, he takes note, adds to his journal of living knowledge, and prepares to test what he has learned. In the tapestry of jungle wisdom, animals are threads of guidance moving, eating, teaching without intention. For shamans, to watch is to learn, to honor that learning in ceremony and medicine, and to pass it forward in a sacred lineage that binds human life to the wild as ancient ways. In each heartbeat of the jungle, the lessons of monkey, jaguar, bird, and insect resonate, teaching that healing springs not from solitary discovery, but from the shared labors of every creature under the canopy. Soft dawn light filters through the dense canopy, gilding the leaves with pale green luminescence. In the hush of morning, the forest floor is slick with dew, each droplet a tiny lens refracting the riot of life above. Here, in this cathedral of wood and vine, lie secrets that have saved countless lives, bark that breaks fevers, sap that stills trembling muscles, leaves that lend endurance to flesh and spirit. The forest does not shout these cures. It whispers them, hidden in mottled bark, coiled vines, and sun-warmed leaves. To hear its counsel is to touch the heartbeat of the earth itself. High on a misty ridge, the cinchona tree stands like a silent sentinel. Its trunk wears a coat of flaky, cinnamon-brown bark, split in places to reveal pale wood beneath. Shamans of old noticed that monkeys, tormented by fevers after heavy rains, gnawed at these fissures and seemed to find relief. They learned to harvest the bark with careful respect, only shaving thin strips so the tree could heal, and to carry it home where it was dried, pounded into powder, and brewed into bitter tea. Villagers drank it under woven shelters, feeling warmth pulse through aching limbs as chills receded like retreating clouds. The Jesuit missionaries who arrived centuries ago heard whispers of this fever-breaking bark. They called it quina, or bark of barks. From Spanish ports, it traveled to Europe, where it became known as quinine. Blood-reddened glimpses of cinchona groves' crimson stains on pale bark filled the pages of early explorers' journals. These accounts spoke of trembling bodies restored, of plunging fevers halted mid-stride, of life reclaimed from the edge of delirium. By the 17th century, quinine tea was served at courtly tables, a luxury medicine born of indigenous knowledge and distilled through colonial trade routes. Yet the forest's gift remained more than chemistry. Shamans believed the cinchona spirit welled in the bark's pattern swirls that resembled lightning-scarred earth. Before each harvest, they sang to the tree, offering tobacco and water, asking permission to take only what was needed. In ritual gatherings, elders recounted how the spirit guided the hands of healers, ensuring that no two trees ever bled too deeply. The community believed that gratitude must accompany every cup of quinine tea, for without respect, the tree's remedy might turn to harm. Far below the ridges, along winding riverbanks, another medicine lurks in creeping vines. Kirari, the vine of death, earned its fearful name from hunters who tipped arrowheads with its milky latex, felling jaguars in silent strikes. The vine's sap courses like liquid shadow, slipping into muscle fibers and issuing a solemn warning: yield or be still. Shamans harvested it sparingly, drawing lines of resin that oozed slowly and hardened into brittle strips. They carried it home to test its power, but only under the hush of full moons, when spirits stood watch. In its raw form, Kirari is a silent executioner, blocking signals between nerves and muscles, so completely that breath itself can cease without a single drop of blood spilled. Legend tells of a shaman's apprentice who overestimated a single grain. Stricken, he sank to the earth as if the forest had claimed him. Only the master's healing chants and a swift brew of antidote, pulverized bark from the chacuna tree, mixed with heated stones, restored breath to the apprentice's lungs. From that night on, Kirari's true power was enshrined in twofold ritual: the brew of life and the brew of stillness, reminding all that medicine and poison share the same root. Yet Kirari's shadowed gift did not remain confined to jungle lore. Centuries later, Western surgeons discovered its muscle-relaxing properties and harnessed it in the operating theater. Under meticulous dosing, Kirari allowed incisions through the body's fortress of muscle, without the agony of struggle. Patients lay still as stone, lungs intubated, while surgeons moved like careful sculptors. From arrow poison to surgical tool, Kuraria's journey is a testament to the forest as ambiguous generosity, a reminder that the line between life and death medicine is measured in micrograms and chance. Between the bark-scarred trunk of the cinchona and the coiled embrace of curare vines, another humble plant grows in sunlit clearings, the coca bush. Its glossy leaves, the color of fresh jade, hold a quiet promise of endurance. Hunters and porters chew them during treks across high passes, feeling a gentle lift in body and spirit. The leaves release alkaloids that ease hunger, sharpen sight, and crown the mind with calm vigilance. In festivals, coca teas are shared before dawn dances, infusing dancers with steady energy that carries them through hours of ritual throbbing. The Andean peoples revered coca as a sacred gift. They spoke of its spirit as a guardian of travelers and miners, a whispering helper in the labyrinthine tunnels of the earth. In ritual offerings, they laid coca bundles at mountain shrines, their vibrant green confetti a pact between human and peak. Shamans taught that chewing coca was not mere stimulant, but a communion. Each leaf pressed to the cheek spoke of ancient kinships, each bead of saliva a prayer for safe passage. In this bond lay the heart of coca's power, an alliance of flesh and green soul. Colonial regimes eyed coca with wariness. They saw its ability to mask hunger among laborers and sought to suppress it. Yet the plant endured, woven into daily life from the Andes to the Amazon foothills. Later, chemists isolated cocaine alkaloids, repackaging them as potent stimulants divorced from ritual. But the original practice, chewing whole leaves, honoring the plant spirit, remains a lesson in moderation and reverence. The forest's medicine is most potent when taken with gratitude, at the pace set by vine and leaf, rather than in purified excess. In the hidden laboratories of shamans, these medicines converge. A single hut may hold cinchona bark hanging to dry, curare resin wrapped in palm leaf, and coca leaves pressed into woven mats. The shaman's hands move with practiced grace, measuring bark chips, dissolving resin in cool river water, boiling coca tea over hot stones. Each preparation carries its own chant, its own offering. A feather fan waved over quinine brew, a drop of blood drawn on curare pith to honor its quiet potency, a pinch of salt added to coca tisane as a token of humility. When malaria strikes its fevered onset, dragging bodies into delirium, the shaman blends cinchona tea with a spoonful of honey and a touch of lemongrass. He sings the fever song, calling fever spirits to release their hold, then watches as sweat beads on the patient's brow and life returns to shivering limbs. When muscle spasms lock the body in pain, he prepares curare's gentle cousin, a diluted decoction that soothes stiffness without stilling the breath and applies it in a warm poultice. When pack animals tire on mountain paths, he offers coca tea, observing the signal of calm energy coursing in the jugular, guiding each step upward. These medicines are more than chemical compounds. They are stories written in bark and leaf. Quinine's journey from cinchona bark to global anti-malarial, curare's transformation from jungle poison to surgical ally, coca's elevation from a sacred tonic to a modern stimulant, all echo the forest's layered paradoxes. Each plant teaches caution and courage, respect and curiosity, humility and innovation. As morning unfurls into a bright canopy above, the shaman steps outside, carrying his pots and pouches. He pauses by the cinchona tree, pressing a small offering of water and tobacco into its roots. "Thank you," he murmurs, voice low as ant steps, "for your gift." Then he watches a troop of capuchins leap through the branches, imagining their scratchings and nibblings, knowing they too are part of this living archive. He smiles, for in the shimmer of leaf and bark lies an endless supply of hidden power waiting to be heard, honored, and shared. In the green half-light of this world, the forest remains both library and laboratory. Its pages are written in bark and resin. Its margins populated by monkeys, macaws, and mythic guardians. Each cure begins with observation monkeys chewing fever-soothing bark, jaguars marking antiseptic trees, coca leaves massaging life into tired veins and blossoms through ritual, respect, and generations of careful trial. These three medicines, quinine, curare, coca, stand as pillars of the jungle's pharmacopoeia, but they are far from all. As you tread deeper into green corridors, trust your eyes, your senses, and your heart, for the next chapter waits on the wind, in the curve of a vine or the shimmer of a leaf, ready to unveil its own hidden power. A pale dawn light filters through the woven thatch of the apprentice's lean, too, casting shifting patterns on the palm-woven mat where he lies with eyes open, listening. Today marks the beginning of his formal journey, though the forest whispered of this path long before birth. His mother, a healer in her own right, sensed the spark in his first breath, a tremor in his cry that echoed the jaguar's howl. Now, elders guide him here, standing at the threshold where child's play gives way to disciplined learning. Before the first lesson, the air is hushed. Even the cicadas hold their song. A single chant rises from the nearest longhouse, a melodic thread that calls initiates to gather. With steady heart, the apprentice rises, wraps a simple cotton cloth around his waist, and steps barefoot into the dewy grass. Each blade grips his foot like a soft warning. This path will demand humility, endurance, and unwavering devotion. They lead him to the council ring, a circle of ancient ceiba logs scarred by centuries of song. At its center rests a small pile of sacred tools, a gorg rattle, a feathered fan, a carved pestle, and a fresh bundle of 21 plants, each chosen for Dawn's first lesson. The head shaman greets him in a voice as warm as the morning sun, yet firm as driftwood. "These are your first teachers," she declares, holding up the first leaf, its edges serrated like a saw. "Learn its name in tongue and spirit. Touch it gently, sense its purpose. Do not taste until you can recite its song." The apprentice bows, palms pressed together, eyes bright with anticipation and awe. In this moment, he understands that every plant has a voice, every melody a memory, and every lesson a cost. The initial days erupt in a torrent of sensory drills. Before sunrise, the apprentice kneels in damp earth, eyes closed, inhaling the musk of fresh leaves pressed against his forehead. His mentor tests him. 2 leaves pressed between slender fingers, and the apprentice names them by scent alone. Quinine's bitterness, guava's sweetness, yerba santa's mint. Then comes sight. Clusters of ochre flowers pinned to a tatami mat, their petal patterns a silent code. One by one, he must trace the vein networks with a fingertip, committing their branching curves to memory. Taste arrives next, a minute sliver of a leaf on the tongue to gauge warmth or chill, sting or calm. Each reaction is cataloged in his mind. The flash of heat that signals stimulant, the slow slide of cool that hints at sedative. By dusk, his fingertips tremble with knowledge, and his mind hums with dozens of leaf names and attributes. As the days fold into weeks, the rhythm deepens. A single dawn might begin with a series of chants. Ta, ru, pa, ta, ru, pa, the syllables arranged to evoke the plant's spirit. The apprentice learns to sing each melody precisely, for a misplaced trill can alter the resonance and thus the medicine's potency. He practices until dawn's first cockcrow, voice hoarse but unwavering, as elders listen for clarity and intention. In those early hours, the forest itself joins. Birds answer with soft calls, wind rattles fragile vines, and dew drips from leaves in time to the drumbeats. Through these sessions, the apprentice discovers that song is more than mnemonic, it is invocation, a key unlocking the plant's essence stored in root and leaf. By midday, the apprenticeship shifts to physical trials. The forest floor becomes a gauntlet of endurance. barefoot runs across hot stones laid in tight patterns, each step teaching balance and precision. He carries small bundles of roots in woven pouches, feeling their weight and aromatic weight as he climbs slopes slick with wet leaves. At the summit of each rise, he pauses to offer thanks tobacco smoke to the wind, water poured at his feet for the river spirits. These rituals instill respect for the elements. Without careful footing, roots bruise and lose potency. Without gratitude, the forest's gates stay closed. As sweat beads on his brow, he recalls the words of his mentor. Discipline refines knowledge, as moonlight clarifies water. Nightfall brings isolation exercises. The apprentice retreats to a secluded hollow beneath twisting boughs, armed only with a clay bowl of water and a handful of bitter tea leaves. He fasts until the moon is high, then sips the concoction to open his senses. Shadows lengthen, and the quiet amplifies. Frogs trill in rhythmic pulses, insects click like tiny castanets, and the wind speaks in a language of distant storms. In this liminal zone, visions may come leaf-scented dreams, animal guides appearing in periphery flashes, whispers of where rare plants hide. He records each site in a charcoal sketch on bark, mapping the dream trails to their waking equivalents. This practice trains him to navigate both the outer forest and inner landscapes. Central to the training is the Vision Questa culminating challenge, where apprentice drinks a carefully dosed ayahuasca brew under the elder's watchful gaze. The brew coils warmth through the veins, dissolving boundaries between flesh and spirit. The apprentice sees root structures glowing beneath the earth, hears petals unfold like wings, and converses with plant spirits in murmurs of rustling leaves. These spirits impart secret knowledge, which vine sap seals wounds, which flower's tea clears coughs, which fungus calms fevered blood. It is an intimate tutorial written in dream logic and intuitive flashes. Upon returning to the hut, the apprentice is pale and trembling, yet his eyes shine with understanding that no book or bark inscription could convey. In the days that follow, the apprentice applies each lesson to living patients. Under the elder's supervision, he prepares salves for mosquito bites and decoctions for gastrointestinal distress. He measures doses by spoonfuls and murmurs plant songs over each patient, feeling the medicine pulse through his fingertips. When a child's fever drops within hours, the apprentice bows his head in reverence, for he knows the triumph is shared between him and the forest, between mentor and student, between leaf and living flesh. Yet failure is equally instructive. When a brew causes nausea stronger than relief, he documents the trial, noting time of harvest and method of preparation, then helps craft an antidote from cooling herbs. These successes and missteps weave into his memory like beads on a vine. Weeks turn into months, and rituals grow in complexity. The apprentice masters the art of preparing multi-plant infusions, each requiring precise layering of brews. He learns to parse the subtle hues of decoctions: straw gold, deep russet, forest green, and to judge concentration by the clarity of steam. He perfects the art of pneumatic inoculation, inhaling powdered spores of antimicrobial fungi and gauging their effect on the throat lining. In firelight, he practices painting the patient's skin with poultices, using intricate spirals and lines to channel spiritual currents. Each pattern carries its own meaning: a looping spiral to draw out fever, a branching fork to guide pain away from the heart, a circle with dot to anchor errant spirits. Throughout this journey, mentorship deepens into partnership. The elder shaman shares not only knowledge, but her fears and hopes. In quiet moments, she confides tales of her own trials, the near-fatal dose of a misguided brew, the months spent learning to walk straight again after an ordeal of visions. The apprentice listens, absorbing the elder's vulnerability as a lesson in humility. He learns that mastery is not a destination, but an ever-turning spiral of discovery, respect, and service. When he falters voices in his dreams too loud to parse, hands trembling before mortar and pestle, The elder places a steady palm on his shoulder and sings a healing Ikaros, restoring his confidence and calling him back to balance. As the moon completes its first full cycle since the apprenticeship began, the time arrives for the final initiation. Under a canopy draped in lantern vines, the apprentice stands before the council ring once more, this time bearing his own offering, a small flask of purified ayahuasca, distilled from vines he harvested himself. Elders and villagers gather, eyes glimmering in firelight. The apprentice recounts the spirit names learned in visions, sings the precise melody that helped him see each plant's hidden face, and offers the brew to the head shaman. When she tastes it and nods in silent approval, a hush falls, a wordless acknowledgement that the apprentice has become a keeper of sacred lines. In the dark stillness that follows, ancestral spirits seem to drift on the breeze, brushing every face with reverence. The apprentice kneels and places his flask at the base of the ledger tree, the same tree where elders inscribed ancient discoveries. With a steady hand, he carves a new glyph, a winding root entwined with a rising spiral, symbolizing the union of Earth's gift and spirit song. He offers a feathered fan to the wind, a small gourd rattle to the river, tobacco smoke to the sky. Each gift carries promise, to protect future healers, to honor those who shaped this path, to keep the Green Library ever open. At dawn's first light, the apprentice, now a full shaman, stands sentry at the forest's edge. He breathes the cool air deeply, feeling the pulse of leaf and limb align with his own. Behind him, apprentices of his own await their calling children whose first cries trembled with ancient echoes. He recalls his own journey, the trials, the failures, the rapturous flicker of visions. In his heart, he carries every plant he has learned, its scent, its song, its gift. And he knows that as long as he walks these verdant halls, the apprenticeship never truly ends. The forest will always speak, and he, like those before him, will listen. A hush falls over the misty morning as a ragged flotilla of wooden ships crests the horizon, white-sailed and yawing in the gentle swell. Below deck, sailors clutch seasick buckets. Above, officers peer through brass spyglasses, scanning the emerald outline of jungle that stretches beyond the surf's foaming edge. For centuries, this coastline has been home to shamans whose feet know every hidden path beneath canopy and vine. Today, those same shamans stir within their huts, sensing a change in the wind, an unfamiliar scent on the breeze. The forest itself seems to bristle at the newcomers, as if wary of vessels that bear neither fish nor native driftwood. When European explorers first stepped onto the tangled shores, they brought more than curiosity. They wrote every detail of the land in their weathered journals. The shape of a fruit that split in crimson juice, the feverish groans of villagers, the aromatic smoke rising from open-air ceremonies. But they interpreted those ceremonies not as healing rites, but as dark rituals, sorcery to be stamped out. Priests traveled alongside conquistadors, crosses gleaming at their belts, axes felling sacred groves. Wooden idols were smashed, ceremonial drums shattered, and shamans huddled in smoky corners, eyes full of sorrow. Yet even as they condemned the healers, the newcomers could not ignore the bark that staunched bleeding, the sap that lifted fevers, or the leaves that eased pain. In scattered notes, they recorded plant names in broken dialects: quina, curare, coca. Sketches of leaves and roots appeared alongside maps of gold mines and routes upriver. A Jesuit father, torn between duty to Rome and compassion for the sick, pored over these records by candlelight, scribbling Latin translations in the margins. Late nights found him secretly brewing bitter teas to comfort colonists dying of fever, all while denouncing the work as devilish back home. Missionaries locked themselves in library cubicles, dissecting herbal manuscripts smuggled from the jungle. They transcribed shaman chants into phonetic alphabets, hoping to root out pagan incantations. Yet under their criticism pulsed a grudging respect. One Franciscan brother confided in a letter that the sap of a red-veined tree cured a settler's gangrenous foot. He wrote of the forest queen, Reina de la Selva, whose spirit guided healers, though he referred to her as the devil's muse. This contradiction, condemn, record, exploit became the hallmark of the colonial encounter. Where armed columns marched, the forest retreated. Sacred groves were cleared for tobacco fields. Rivers were dammed for mills. Entire villages were relocated. Shamans, stripped of their spiritual altars, took refuge in hidden clearings deep beneath impenetrable canopies. There, under torchlight and chanting, they passed on secret compendia of plant lore, handwritten glyphs on bark fragments, leaf-pressed codices, whispered verses recorded only in the hearts of chosen apprentices. Meanwhile, botanical gardens sprouted in Lisbon and Seville, populated with specimens powdered and dried, each labeled with scientific names, but utterly severed from ritual context. European naturalists arrived in later years, armed not with muskets, but with magnifying glasses. They corresponded with shamans in broken Spanish and pidgin dialects, trading iron tools for dried seeds. Some shamans welcomed them warily, seeing in these strangers the chance to preserve their pharmacopoeia before missionaries burned it away. Together, they trekked along flooded rivers, mapping each grove where fever-quelling cinchona bark grew, or where the moonlit blossoms of nightshade released soporific scents. The naturalists catalogued hundreds of specimens, pressing leaves between paper and glass. But they recorded only botanical descriptions, leaf shape, flower color, bark texture blanking out the songs once sung at the plant's harvest. Back in Europe, quacks and scholars alike hailed these exotic discoveries. Quinine became a commodity traded far beyond colonial frontiers. Its bitter powder bottled and sold to armies fighting malaria in Africa and Asia. Yet recipes seldom included the shaman's ritual of gratitude. No tobacco smoke, no whispered thanks to forest spirits. Curer's paralyzing juice found its way into 19th century operating theaters, revolutionizing surgery, but divorced from the solemn incantations that once balanced risk and respect. Coca leaves morphed into potent alkaloid extracts, marketed as tonics for nervous ailments, far from the communal chewings at dawn festivals by Andean villagers. Despite exploitation, some Europeans recognized the human cost of erasing shamanic tradition. Ethnographers in the early 20th century began traveling to remote villages, cameras and notebooks in hand, intent on preserving the full tapestry of healing culture. They recorded shamans' icaros, medicine songs, filmed ritual dances, and mapped oral genealogies of plant spirits. These recordings, framed as anthropological artifacts, leaked back to ancestral communities. In hidden hut corners, villages replayed scratchy phonograph discs of their forebears' chants, rediscovering medicine songs thought lost to fire and decree. As colonial powers waned, indigenous movements stirred. Shamans, now elderly custodians, returned to once forbidden sacred sites, rebuilding altars in defiance of decades of prohibition. They raised seedlings of medicinal plants, uprooted for pasture, repopulating groves in rewilding projects. Young apprentices, armed with both ancestral knowledge and Western education, published bilingual herbals, listing Latin binomials beside ancestral names, and detailing chants alongside chemical constituents. These texts bridged worlds, honoring the spirit medicines even as they engaged with global pharmacology. Yet scars remain. Many plants are endangered cinchona groves replaced by coffee plantations, rare vines over-harvested for commercial extracts. Shamans hold community councils to protect these species, instituting seasonal bans on harvesting and training guards to patrol sacred corridors. They teach ecological ethics as integral to healing, that each root must be harvested in cycles, each leaf offered thanks, each flower left to seed. This revivalist ethos includes ceremonial replantings festivals where children dance around newly sprouted cinchona seedlings, chanting the names of ancestral healers whose voices once rang in the longhouse. Modern science continues to draw from this intertwined legacy. Pharmaceutical companies license compounds discovered centuries ago, attributing names to laboratories rather than spirits. Yet some firms now enter collaboration agreements with indigenous councils, providing royalties for every cough syrup, malaria tablet, or painkiller sold. In return, they fund community clinics, forest conservation trusts, and cultural revival programs for shamans' apprenticeships. It's a fragile détente, born of necessity and/or perhaps of respect, awakened too late. In the twilight of this chapter, the air still trembles with echoes of cannon fire and hymns of the conquered. The forest stands, scarred but alive, its roots entwined with the whispered names of those who dared to learn its secrets under threat of fire and cross. Shamans once vilified as sorcerers, now echo across conference halls as expert consultants, their knowledge valued by scientists who once burned their huts. In clay huts beneath vast canopies, new generations learn the old songs and the new languages, carrying forward a legacy writ in leaf and chant, in chemical formulas and spirit packs. In every clipped leaf pressed between modern pages, in every patent filed for an alkaloid extract, vibrates a memory of the shaman's midnight vigil. Those early encounters, marked by dismissal and appropriation, gave rise to a pharmacopoeia that spans continents. But the true healing emerges only when both science and spirit sit at the same hearth, sharing firelight and story. Only then does colonial pain transmute into collaborative promise, and the forest's green corridors continue to yield cures born of ancient reverence, nurtured by survival and renewed in the songs of tomorrow's healers. The lab is half-lit by afternoon sun slanting through high windows, dust motes drifting like tiny spirits in shafts of gold. On a bench strewn with glass vials and paper notes, an ethnobotanist leans close to a leaf pressed beneath a slip of microscope glass. Her gloved finger traces the faint network of veins that once pulsed with jungle rainwater. She breathes in deeply, as if inhaling echoes of forest mist, and remembers the shaman-esque words whispered before dawn on her first expedition. Listen with your body. Science hears only the question you already know how to ask. It began in the mid-20th century, when Richard Evans Schultz's broad-brimmed hat, boots caked in clay, trekked deeper into the Colombian Amazon than any outsider before him. Local healers offered him hallucinogenic snuff and guided him to a clearing lit by phosphorescent fungi. He sat cross-legged on damp earth, listening to frogs trill in chorus, and recorded plant names in his field notebook: Yage, Virola, Banisteriopsis caapi. When he returned to Harvard, he brought specimens that would ripple into laboratory beakers and shape modern pharmacology. His work proved that the invisible cures of the forest could be cataloged, studied, and, with caution, understood by science. In one such lab decades later, a graduate student unravels a thin strip of bark labeled Paulinia spp. Under a fume hood, she dissolves its powder in solvent, watching as amber solution beads form at the edge of the flask. She remembers the moment she first witnessed a shaman extract tonic from the same vine, how the healer sang to the bark, offering tobacco smoke in honeyed water, invoking the vine's spirit to reveal its healing pulse. In return, local villagers sipped the tonic to chase away exhaustion during planting season. Now the student hopes to isolate the active compound, perhaps a new stimulant with fewer side effects than caffeine. She reverently drafts her hypothesis into the lab journal. Forest tradition meets molecular clarity. Partnerships between scientists and indigenous communities have evolved from extractive to collaborative. In the 1980s, guided by ethnobotanists like Mark Plotkin, tribes in Guyana invited researchers into hidden forest groves. They led them past hanging bridges of vines to stands of the miracle nut, whose oily kernels combat tropical ulcers. In return, scientists shared microscopes and established seed banks to protect endangered species. Together, they mapped genetic lineages, ensuring that each specimen's DNA profile would survive, even if logging machines arrive tomorrow. These alliances recognize that knowledge is not a commodity, but a covenant. When a pharmaceutical company patented an analgesic derived from the bark of a remote Peruvian tree, local shamans protested, not for money, but for respect. They had guarded that tree's grove for centuries, offering sacrifices and songs to maintain its potency. After months of negotiation, the company agreed to share royalties and fund a medical clinic in the nearest village. In the clean white halls of that clinic, children once plagued by parasitic fevers now receive free vaccinations and herbal tonics side-by-side medicine born of two worlds. The alchemy of lab and forest has yielded astonishing breakthroughs. Quinine, isolated from cinchona bark, became the foundation for anti-malarial drugs that saved millions of lives. Curaire's muscle-relaxing molecules entered operating theaters, transforming surgery's risk calculus. Less celebrated, but equally profound, the rosy periwinkle of Madagascar, though not jungle from the Americas, gave us vincristine and vinblastine, life-saving chemotherapy agents, discovered when soil chemistry experts noticed that local healers used the tiny flowers to staunch bleeding. Each success story weaves through villages where ancient chants still echo beneath towering trees. Yet rediscovery is never simple. A researcher might pulverize leaves in pursuit of an active alkaloid, only to realize that efficacy depended on a ritual chant synchronizing heartbeats with leaf vibrations. In Guatemala, scientists testing bark extracts for anti-inflammatory properties found inconsistent results until they learned that shamans harvested the bark only during the waning moon, believing lunar gravity concentrated sap. Replicating experiments without that timing produced weak decoctions. Only when lab schedules bent to lunar calendars did results stabilize. Training bridges also take root in universities. Ethnobotanical programs now require fieldwork alongside elders who lecture not from slides, but beneath canopy. Rain trickling on palm roofs. Students learn to record plant songs' melodies, chanted in pitch and rhythm, and to match them with molecular structures. Hummingbird wing motifs, echoing flavonoid rings, serpent scale chants, corresponding with steroid backbones. In one such class, a young scientist tap dances across a stone path, memorizing leaf arrangement patterns. Her palm leaf sketches become botanical blueprints, guiding high-performance liquid chromatography runs. Conservation urgency presses every collaboration. As deforestation slices corridors between groves, microclimates shift and pharmacopoeia fades. In Borneo, researchers scrambled to document the uses of a single resin-bearing bark before a road cut fuel wood company's route to the forest margin. Their audio-recorded interviews with Iban shamans captured not only preparation steps, but songs invoking forest spirits. These recordings now live in digital archives, teaching future scientists the incantations integral to each remedy. The melding of modern science and tradition also challenges ethical paradigms. Institutional review boards now require proof of prior informed consent before any specimen crosses a border. University-industry partnerships must ensure benefit-sharing agreements, cultural respect protocols, and repatriation of data. Some tribes retain sovereignty over genetic samples. Only they may decide when a compound can be chemically modified. In Peru, a community co-owns a patent on a novel anti-parasitic isolated from local bark, earning royalties that fund reforestation projects and pay for apprenticeships under elder shamans. Clinical trials, once blind to cultural contexts, now embrace integrative models. In Brazil, patients receive both hydroalcoholic extracts of Brazilian pepper tree and standard antibiotics for skin infections. Their outcomes measured against both bacterial clearance and patient-reported spiritual well-being. Results indicate that holistic protocols, honoring both microbial eradication and ceremonial rites, accelerate recovery and reduce relapse. Peer-reviewed journals publish data alongside ethnographic appendices, offering both efficacy metrics and rich context of ceremony chant, and communal support. Science also learns humility. A high-throughput screen may flag dozens of candidate compounds from hundreds of plants, but only field-tested remedies, validated by centuries of daily use, survive further development. In Papua New Guinea, researchers discovered that a particular mangrove leaf contained an antiviral molecule active against dengue in vitro. Yet villagers warned that improper drying induced liver toxicity. Without their insight, a promising drug might have vanished in clinical failure or worse. Instead, scientists adopted traditional processing, sun-drying leaves for exactly 3 days, followed by smoke curing over specific local hardwoods, an artisanal step that preserved efficacy and safety. The global pharmaceutical map now includes biocultural hotspots where indigenous knowledge steers sampling efforts. Botanists overlay maps of linguistic diversity with biodiversity indices, seeking regions where language families carry centuries of oral pharmacopoeia. In one rainforest cluster, the Shamans people's dialect diverged in arcane plant names, suggesting unique local remedies. International research teams partner with Shamans councils, co-authoring publications that list both scientific names and ancestral terms, braiding bioactivity data with melody transcriptions of incantations. Technology amplifies these bridges. Mobile apps allow shamans to record GPS-tagged plant sightings and instantly upload photos to cloud databases. Ethnobotanists annotate each entry with analytic chemistry profiles, creating a living atlas where tribal elders and laboratory directors track plant populations and compound stability. In remote villages, solar-powered tablets display 3D molecular models during harvest seasons, helping younger healers understand how the macroscopic leaf relates to microscopic alkaloid rings. The dialogue between science and tradition extends to global health policy. The World Health Organization now recognizes traditional medicine as an integral pillar of primary health care. Guidelines encourage member states to integrate vetted herbal remedies into national formularies, with dosage and preparation protocols co-developed by scientists and healers. In rural clinics, posters depict both chemical structures and sacred leaf patterns, reminding practitioners that every pill has a human story and every herb a molecular signature. Academic conferences showcase these partnerships. Keynote sessions feature indigenous delegates alongside Nobel laureates. The stage transforms into a grove of leafy boughs, with ritual fires flickering at the edges and chairs arranged in a circle rather than rows symbolic of collective wisdom. There, a shaman drums a welcoming beat before a pharmacologist unveils data on anti-cancer compounds derived from the Amazon's phyllanthus vines. The applause that follows honors both the rigor of science and the depth of ancestral memory. Yet challenges endure. Intellectual property disputes flare when corporations pursue patents on derivatives of traditional extracts. Some propose open-source bioprospecting models, where all compound patents remain in the public domain, with benefit sharing enforced through international law. Others advocate a pharma commons, a collaborative pool where corporations, governments, and indigenous communities co-own discoveries. These models seek to recalibrate power dynamics, ensuring that the riches of the forest fertilize both global health and local livelihoods. In Living Roofs of Green, the dialogue deepens as each new generation of healers straddles two worlds. Many hold PhDs in organic chemistry and wear feathered headdresses at dawn ceremonies. They draft grant proposals by morning and chant Icaros by night, translating field notes into peer-reviewed articles that cite both journal articles and oral testimonies. Their work stands as proof that the most potent remedies arise when chemical equations and spirit chants coalesce. Back in the lab, the ethnobotanist lifts the cover of her Petri dish. Tiny seedlings derived from seeds gifted by a remote village unfurl first leaves in sterile white light. Each seed carries DNA shaped by ancestral selection centuries of mutual cultivation between humans and plants. Soon she will test extracts against cell cultures, hoping to discover new antibiotics in an age of rising resistance. She closes her eyes, picturing the forest at dawn, young apprentices gathering dew-heavy leaves with reverence. She whispers a silent vow. May this work honor your songs and sustain your groves. In that interstice between glass and green, science and tradition clasp hands. The microscopes peer into cellular secrets. The shamans peer into realms of spirit. Both journeys, molecular and mystical, vanish false boundaries, revealing that healing is neither solely mechanical nor purely magical, but an art woven from both. And as long as there are forests murmuring with life and laboratories pulsing with inquiry, the rediscovery will continue, an endless unfolding of cures hidden in plain sight, waiting for both senses and soul to listen. A distant roar shatters the dawn's stillness-engineered thunder, rolling down the ridge where once only howler monkeys called. In a matter of heartbeats, sunlight floods a swath of emerald that yesterday held saplings of cat's claw and creeping vines of Sangre de Drago. Today, that green tapestry lies overturned. Freshly gouged trenches, ringed with fallen trunks, the pungent scent of oil, slicked earth rising with the heat. Where birds once nested, silence reigns. Seeds scattered by toucans and macaws lay buried beneath mechanized furrows. And with them, a chorus of plant wisdom vanishes. Knowledge passed down in whispered chants and dream-lit visions is swallowed by exhaust fumes and the relentless push of progress. Colonial axes carved the first rifts. From the 16th century onward, conquistadors marching under the cross cleared ancient groves to plant sugar, tobacco, and cocoa. Sacred shrines of woven vines and carved idols toppled, their spirits exiled from the living world. Shamans learned to bend words into secret syllables, hiding plant names beneath layers of metaphor, so colonizers heard only harmless fairy tales. But every bark-scribed glyph burned in the missionary blaze, erased a thread in the tapestry of knowing. Healers who had once strode barefoot through cathedral-high buttress roots now trod the outskirts of deforested pastures, their medicines reduced to faint echoes remembered by trembling lips. Modernity arrived on rattling trucks and roared in diesel symphonies. Logging roads cleaved forests like lightning scars, inviting squatters, ranchers, and speculators. Each road became an artery of change. Young men, lured by paychecks, abandoned apprenticeship under shamans to fell trees by day and guzzle cold beer by night. Women once summoned to boil concoctions now queued for manufactured pills at dusty clinics. The songs of vine and leaf fell silent in villages emptied by urban promises, as teenagers traded mat weaving for cell phone selfies, leaving behind roots unharvested and chants unsung. Deforestation accelerates climate change, shifting rainfall patterns that govern the growth of countless species. Some plants bloom only after specific torrents. Others fruit only in the hush after drought. When rains falter or pour too fiercely, seedlings drown or wither before maturity. Botanists warn that up to 70% of tropical medicinal species could disappear by mid-century. Every lost stem, every uprooted shrub carries away a molecule unstudied by modern labs. A molecule that might have broken fevers, quelled pain, or soothed anxieties. Without the plant, its spirit teacher falls silent forever. Colonial legacies compound the crisis. Land titling laws, forged in distant capitals, often exclude indigenous stewardship. Governments grant concessions to corporate loggers and oil companies, carving national parks into checkerboards of exploitation. Shamans, now reduced to desperate petitions, find their groves designated unclaimed or commercial. When bulldozers arrive, they can only chant through cracked megaphones, beseeching spirits whose altars lay buried beneath heavy treads. Communities struggle to adapt. A single elder, a living library of hundreds of plant names, rituals, and visions, represents a generation's worth of study. When she dies, her passing extinguishes entire volumes of unwritten lore. Oral traditions fracture when apprentices depart for city schools, where ancestral languages lose ground to national tongues. In remote huts, ritual pipes grow dusty, and ayahuasca brews ferment only in memory. The forest's medicine songs become nursery rhymes for toddlers, their meanings lost as elders pass beyond recall. Globalization brings yet another blow. The pharmaceutical industry markets standardized extracts of jungle plant scirari analogs for surgery, quinine derivatives for malaria, while ignoring the subtle rituals that modulate dosage and spiritual context. Patients in rural clinics receive pills stamped with factory logos, never taught to honor the forest that yielded their cure. Without ritual, medicine's power feels hollow, and communities grow indifferent to the living pharmacy all around them. The forest's green corridors close as people cease to notice the whisper of healing in each leaf. Language loss deepens the tragedy. Many shamans speak only ancestral dialects that carry plant names bound to spirit lineages. When younger generations adopt Spanish, Portuguese, or English, those names become foreign. A vine called Ururui in one tongue may be Yakama in another, its identity slipping further from recognition. Dictionaries compile Latin binomials, but cannot capture the nuance of a plant's song, its shape, or the precise moment the dew must be gathered. Botanical gardens label specimens with sterile names, oblivious to the chants that once accompanied their harvest. Even conservation efforts can backfire. Researchers eager to catalog species erect fences around research plots, cutting villages off from customary gathering grounds. They count rare orchids and survey leaf samples, but the fences bar traditional healers. Plants grow in isolation, deprived of ritual offerings, tobacco for roots, honey for flowers that shamans believe sustain their potency. In time, seedlings sprout, yet shrivel, as if starved of spiritual fertilizer. Science measures soil nutrients, but misses the intangible ecology of reverence. Economics drives land conversion faster than ethics can respond. Palm oil plantations march across hills where the red bark of Sangre de Grotto once healed burns. Cattle ranches trample mossy groves where night-blooming flowers lulled fevers to sleep. Mining concessions bleed toxic effluent into streams where caimans and medicinal fish once taught lessons in parasite control. Each industry hides behind promises of jobs and income, while erasing the knowledge that could have fed both bodies and economies sustainably. Amid this collapse, pockets of resilience emerge. In one village, women formed a seed guardians cooperative. At dawn, they gather fragile pods of cacao, achiote, and native glossocardia, weaving them into fiber braids hung beneath the thatched roofs of the council hut. They teach village children to sing the seed songs melodies that encode harvest rituals, ethical protocols, and spirit acknowledgments. Each song is a lifeline, preserving not only the genetic blueprint, but the ritual context that keeps medicines alive in both body and soul. In another valley, a band of young healers revived clandestine apprenticeships. Under cloak of night, they slip into hidden groves, collecting dew-moistened leaves of the moonflower for dream teas. They chant in ancestral tongues as they braid bark into medicinal ropes, refusing to surrender to the blank slate of modern pharmaceuticals. When logging crews rumble nearby, they scatter tobacco smoke, invoking sentinel spirits who once guarded those same trees. Their courage stirs whispers of taboo youngsters begin sneaking away from smartphones to learn leaf names by lantern light. Elsewhere, alliances between shamans and ethnobotanists win small victories. Legal frameworks once stacked against indigenous land rights are being reformed. Community-managed conservation areas now appear on official maps, demarcated not by security fences, but by spirit-marked boundaries. Circles of termite tower stones, lines of sacred pebbles, corridors of elder-planted trees. Scientific surveys cross-reference Latin names with shamanic songlines, producing bilingual guides that describe how to harvest, prepare, and consecrate each root, leaf, and bark. These tomes, printed on recycled banana paper, travel in backpacks alongside GPS devices and smartphones, bridging the ancient and the modern. Technology offers new tools for preservation. Mobile apps let healers record plant sightings with voice memos, preserving the cadence of ancestral names. Drone surveys map remote groves, ensuring they cannot be recategorized for commercial logging without alerting villagers. Virtual reality recreates sacred clearings, allowing urban youth to explore jungle labyrinths in lifelike immersion, reminding them of the green world even as they scroll through city streets. Yet for every grove saved, 10 more slip beneath bulldozers. And for every app downloaded, dozens of elders pass away unrecorded. The clock of extinction ticks in bioluminescent fungi and night-blooming orchids, in little-known lianas, whose bark contains potent anti-cancer alkaloids. When deforestation edges into new frontiers, deep in Suriname, remote in Papua, hidden in the Congo Basin, the same patterns replay. Loggers arrive, shamanic rituals go underground. Apprentices abandon their pouches of seeds for backpacks of nickel-cadmium batteries. Modern schools rarely teach plant lore. Test scores hinge on chemistry formulas and historical dates. Final exams ignore the living library underfoot. A generation grows up knowing antibiotics come from pills, not from root decoctions. They log outdoor excursions on apps, but cannot name a single medicinal vine. Without curiosity, the green pharmacopoeia becomes a ghost, its shelves cleared in silent looting. When fever strikes, they line up for injections. When pain flares, they swallow tablets. When grief overwhelms, they seek therapy, unaware that their ancestors carried a map of cures in their bones. Some propose returning to school curriculums, the ethnobotany hour, a weekly lesson where children learn leaf identification by sight and scent, practice gathering rituals at recess, and sing seed songs. But such proposals clash with entrenched educational priorities. Standardized test metrics, STEM lab grants, global college rankings. The danger is that shamanic wisdom will be deemed cultural extras, optional if time allows, rather than core knowledge integral to survival, both of people and planet. Climate refugees compound the crisis. As lowland forests flood or desertify, entire tribes migrate to cities or higher altitudes. They carry only the clothes on their backs and the faint echo of ancestral chants. Once scattered, their knowledge fragments further, no longer tied to a particular grove or microclimate. Without the interplay of local environment and shamanic practice, plant wisdom becomes untethered, like a book ripped from its shelf and carried into a hall of noise where no one has time to read. Even within so-called protected areas, illegal logging persists. Armed loggers slip through guard posts, driven by global demand for rosewood, mahogany, and rare hardwoods. Shamans chase them on foot, chanting, offering tobacco smoke, demanding they cease. But guns and profits drown out songs and smoke. Each lost log marks a site where a healer once felt the bark's pulse under fingertips, recognized its call, and carved medicine bowls in its honor. And yet, the forest's last stand remains possible. It depends on reclaiming the very idea that knowledge is more than data points. It is the heartbeat of a living world. When a shaman chants, she does more than recite information. She animates a covenant between humans and green life. When a seed is planted alongside a song, it grows nourished by both soil and spirit. When a leaf is gathered with gratitude and offering, its molecules retain a resonance medicine alone cannot convey. To stem the tide requires more than policy or petitions. It demands a cultural shift. We must relearn how to see forests, not as timber reserves or carbon sinks, but as libraries of possibility. We must honor the voices that shaped those libraries, voices that spoke in plant names, in rattles and flutes, in dreams and ceremony. We must ensure that every tree felled carries with it a vow, to record its story, to propagate its lineage, to pass on its guardian song. The vanishing knowledge of shamanic tradition is not just a loss for isolated villages. It is an eclipse of humanity's collective memory. When the last bark scratched ledger fades, millions of potential remedies, solutions to cancer, malaria, dementia slip beyond reach. And with them disappears a way of living that saw healing as a sacred dialogue, not a transaction. In the hush after the bulldozers fade, the forest stands empty of its stewards, its corridors silent as unplayed harps. But in corners of the world, small fires still burn beneath thatch roofs. In whispered gatherings and clandestine clearings, apprentices learn root names again. They trace leaf veins with their thumbs, chant Icaros under flickering oil lamps, and hang seed bundles like prayer flags from rafters. They study chemical structures alongside song melodies, bridging ancient and modern. Their voices rise in soft defiance, a counter-melody to the engines beyond the ridge. It may be a fragile chorus, but until the last seed dies, the song can still be sung. And in that song lies the hope that, one day, forests will regrow, and with them, the living lexicon of plant wisdom will awaken again, root, leaf, and human heart bound in the eternal dance of survival. The forest at dusk exhales one last breath of warmth before settling into its nocturnal hush. In that deepening twilight, shafts of dying light drift through leaves like pale ghosts, illuminating drifting motes that seem to tremble with memory. The earth beneath your feet has witnessed centuries of footsteps, those of jaguars, of monkeys, of shamans guided by the breath of unseen specters. Here, at the threshold of night, the canopy parts just enough to reveal flickers of starlight. In this liminal space between day's certainty and night's enigma, we pause to ask the question that has outlasted every bark-inscribed ledger and every fever-broken patient. Did shamans uncover nature's cures purely through painstaking trial and error, or did their power spring from a deeper communion with the living spirit of the jungle? Across millennia, healers have pressed their palms into damp earth and bowed their heads beneath pillars of green, keeping vigil in silence as plants revealed themselves. They tested roots one by one, tiny nibbles, followed by hours of watchful waiting, cataloging every tremor, every shiver, every transformation of pain into relief. Their successes built the foundations of remedies still used today. Quinine's fever-breaking bite, Curaire's precise stillness, the coca leaf's gentle lift of spirit. Each proper dose, each avoided misstep, was a triumph of patience. In that relentless cycle of hypothesis, experiment, observation, and refinement, they amassed knowledge beyond any single mind's capacity. A living library woven in leaves and songs, recorded on strips of bark and carried in memory from mentor to apprentice. Yet alongside these systematic trials lay rituals of smoke and chant, of dream and vision. Shamans spoke of bartering with the plant spirits in exchange of offerings for insight. They inhaled bitter vine fumes until their limbs gave way, plunging into dreamscapes where the humming of frogs became instruction, and the rippling of streams revealed hidden groves of healing vines. In trance, they encountered animal guides, an anaconda winding through astral waters, an owl whose unblinking gaze illuminated the patterns in leaf veins. The messages they brought back were not only recipes, but revelations. The dream of a copper-hued flower that bubbled fevers into steam, the echo of a jaguar's prowl that pointed to an antiseptic resin. These were not accidents of imagination, shamans insisted, but invitations from a living world that spoke in its own tongue. Modern science, arriving centuries later with glass beakers and petri dishes, embraced a parallel path. Ethnobotanists like Richard Evans Schultz trekked into virgin forests to collect specimens labeled in local dialects. Yage, Urana, Virola. They carried these samples into laboratories where microscopes revealed cellular architectures and mass spectrometers teased out active alkaloids. Through chemical fractionation, they isolated the compounds responsible for quinine's antimalarial effect, Curaire's neuromuscular block, coca's mild stimulant buzz. Clinical trials confirmed efficacy and determined dosage with precision unthinkable to a shaman's intuitive measure. Pills replaced poultices, tinctures supplanted teas, and standardized extracts arrived in clinics far from the forest's edge. Yet in the glare of fluorescent light, something essential lingered beyond quantification. A clinician's syringe may deliver Curer's paralytic gift, but without the shaman's invocation of balance of life. Breath offered back through tobacco smoke before the first dose patients can feel only the cold calculus of muscle relaxation, not the ceremony that honors the fragility of breath itself. Quinine in tablet form defeats malaria parasites, yet it lacks the shaman's song to the cinchona spirit. A thank you, sung into the smoke of burning bark, a vow to protect the grove so that future seekers might learn its secret. And coca's chemical cousin, cocaine, packaged for modern appetite, has forgotten the respectful chew of whole leaves in dawn's cool air ritual, offering to mountain guardians that tempered hunger, smoothed fatigue, and anchored travelers' spirits. This tension between meticulous bioassay and the ineffable voice of forest spirits lies at the heart of the enduring mystery. Can discovery be reduced entirely to double-blind trials and dose-response curves? Or does the mind's openness, shaped by ritual and belief, alter perception of efficacy itself? Neuroscience hints that expectation and ritual context shape pain relief and immune response, that our bodies may respond differently when medicine carries meaning beyond molecules. The placebo effect, long dismissed as trivial, now reveals pathways where mind and body converge. Could shamanic ceremonies, with their layered offerings and communal gatherings, have co-authored the healing process, accelerating recovery in ways mechanistic measures overlook? Consider the Yage vine Banisteriopsis copy, whose L-inhibiting compounds unlock visions when paired with DMT-rich Psychotria viridis. In the laboratory, researchers isolate harmine and dimethyltryptamine, study receptor binding, and map neural circuits ignited by vision. But the full spectrum of ayahuasca's healing, documented in dozens of clinical studies, emerges only when brew is administered in ceremony, under strict dietary vows, accompanied by a carouse sung live with caring community support. Participants report not only symptom relief, less anxiety, reduced depression, but profound shifts in worldview, a rekindled connection to nature's rhythms. That spiritual dimension, unmeasurable by blood levels alone, seems integral to the medicine's power. Perhaps the shaman's advantage lay in a mode of knowing that transcends narrow categories of science versus spirit. They tuned their senses to the forest's bioacoustic frequencies, the low drone of insects signaling inflammation, the crackle of falling seed pods indicating hidden groves, the hush after rain hinting at bloom cycles. They observed patterns across seasons, phases of the moon, animal migrations. Their bodies became living assays. Every pulse, every shiver, every visualization was data. And their spirits, cultivated through meditation and vision quest, turned intuition into knowledge, knitting together fragments of trial into a tapestry of wisdom. In this way, the forest itself taught them, guiding each hand that plucked leaf or splintered bark. Science now catches up to some of these insights. Ethnobotanical meta-analyses reveal that many potent remedy plants share seasonal or lunar harvesting windows, likely correlating with peak secondary metabolite production. Chronobiology studies confirm that circadian rhythms influence alkaloid concentrations. Researchers even explore bioacoustic entrainment, exposing cell cultures to plant-derived vibration frequencies and noting enhanced growth responses. These fields border on the frontier where traditional knowledge anticipated phenomena long before instruments could detect them. The shaman's spiritual teachings echo in emerging disciplines that blur lines between biology, physics, and consciousness studies. Still, a question remains. Could the cures hidden in the jungle, those not yet brought to light, require the same dual lens? Among the forest's millions of identified species, and the tens of thousands yet unnamed, how many hold molecules waiting for isolation? How many yield their gifts only when approached with both lab glasses and open heart, with sterile protocols and sacred chants? When a yet undiscovered vine trembles under the moon's pull, might its secret uncoil only for the one who listens with marrow-level reverence? In confronting that possibility, we return to dusk's first hush, the forest, breathing in slow pulses of shadow and light. We stand at the edge, where knowledge hard-won through trial and error meets the vast unknown of spirit's whisper. The choice before us is not between science and tradition, but how to weave them into a living loom of healing. Can we honor the meticulous rigor of bioassay and clinical validation while preserving the ritual frameworks that anchor medicine in meaning? Can we ensure that every compound patented carries a story of gratitude, that every harvest includes a prayer of reciprocity? Perhaps the enduring mystery is a reminder of humility, that the greatest teachers remain those who bow to life's complexity rather than imposing narrow certainties upon it. When we isolate a single alkaloid from a tree's bark, we glimpse a merciless clarity of structure, but risk severing our connection to the greater whole. When we sing a song to a plant spirit, we open ourselves to tacit vows of stewardship, but risk mistaking faith for fact. True wisdom may lie in holding both tenderly, in letting science map the molecular structures, while letting ritual consecrate each leaf plucked, each compound ingested. As the first stars bloom above the canopy, we close our eyes and listen to the forest nocturne, the soft hum of insects, the distant cry of nightjars, the sigh of wind through branches. This is the same score shamans heard when they first knelt in trial, when they first dreamed of spores and petals, when they first let spirit guide their fingertips to the cure. That song remains, waiting for those who will still their minds enough to hear it. In the end, whether cures were born from trial and error or from communion with the unseen may matter less than the journey of discovery itself. Each decoction tested, each chant uttered, each vision received was a step deeper into understanding life's woven fabric. Science and spirit, trial and trance, logic and lyric all played parts in an unending symphony of healing. And so we leave this realm not with an answer neatly carved in stone, but with a promise to continue listening, to keep testing with rigor, to honor ceremony with gratitude, and to remember that the jungle's greatest secret is the living breath that ties us all, plant, animal, shaman, scientist, into one ever-unfolding mystery.